Chapter 1926. There is a wider world out there. Shut up. There was actually someone that dared tell Yan Xianlu to shut up to his face. Hiss, everyone inhaled sharply, an expression of disbelief on their faces. It was not just one but two. How brazen. Just who were these two women? But since they had been able to come here, they had to be top-notch emperor tiers. Could it be that they did not have any idea that they had to treat Yan Xianlu very respectfully? To say nothing of the fact that he was the heir of an 8th heaven celestial king. He himself was a monarch tier. Was that not enough? But what was even more shocking to the rest was that after Yan Xianlu had been yelled at, he was actually not angered. He merely shook his head and looked exasperated. It had to be that Yan Xianlu, as a gentleman, was unwilling to clash with women. But it was not everyone that thought this. They looked at Huanian. This was a person that they had not seen before. If top-notch emperor tiers like them could not remember even this, then they were really unworthy of being called emperor tiers. This young girl had come uninvited, and Yan Xianlu actually did not fly into a fury. What was the meaning of this? She is that demonic girl. SH*T2Y girl. Someone had recognized Huanian. These were the several people that Huanian had surpassed on her way. Though there were many paths to the summit, there were quite a number of people here too. Thus, after Huanian had chosen one path, it was definite that a considerable number of people would be surpassed by her, and they naturally were terribly wed over. All of a sudden, at least 10 people set their eyes on Huanian, all of them burning with fury. Though Huanian was world-shakingly beautiful, she had a completely different style from the Empress. The Empress was noble and poised, and thought that everyone in this world should submit to her, exuding a pride that was deeply embedded into her very bones. Huanian was wild and willful, and the little actions that she showed were extremely mischievous. It was like she was a child that had not grown up. And precisely because of this, Huanian did not have as strong a bearing, or as captivating a beauty as the Empress. In truth, if the Empress did what Huanian had done, there would probably be very few that could truly become angry with her. Of course, the Empress was not one to do something so risky. Huanian bared her teeth like a female panther that was raging. What is it? You guys want to fight? Those dozen-plus people naturally were even more infuriated. Because of you, we were stomped over by 100 over-manifestations, and you actually do not feel even the slightest bit apologetic? Hee, everyone, please calm your anger. Yan Xianlu stepped out and pressed his hands down slightly. Listen to me for a while as I tell you about the reason why I have invited everyone here. He was probably also very depressed now. If it had been in the past, he definitely would have been the center that everyone revolved around. He only had to say one word, and everyone would be attentively looking at him. What need would be there for him to repeat his words multiple times? But Huanian was too strong. Even if he used his ultimate technique, Huanian had hers too, and furthermore, it was incredibly terrifying at that. In an instant, she had destroyed thousands of manifestations in a single move. His was far inferior to this. However, Yan Xianlu was Yan Xianlu, after all. When he said so, everyone had suppressed their anger, at least for the moment. Huanian wanted to glare again, yet Ling Han rubbed her head. Instantly, she showed an expression of enjoyment, no longer bearing a grudge against them. Everyone clicked their tongues in amazement at this sight. Huanian was so fierce, but in front of Ling Han, she was so docile. This was really something that they could not conceive. However, at the same time, they were filled with envy towards Ling Han. After all, putting aside the ferocious nature of Huanian, she was still a great beauty that was unmatched in her exquisiteness. Moreover, in front of Ling Han, wasn't this exquisite beauty also very gentle? Why is that I can't find this kind of woman? Huanian continued her glaring contest with the Empress. With Ling Han on the sidelines, it was definite that they would not be able to come to blows, but the battle between them had already begun. The reason why I have invited everyone here is primarily to form an alliance. Yan Xianlu finally announced the main topic. Ha ha ha. Shan Jitong immediately erupted into raucous laughter. Alliance? What a joke. You want me to become allies with this trash? His eyes swept over those assembled, filled with utter disdain towards them. Of course, when his eyes passed over Huanian, his pupils dilated a little. It was as if Hu Niu's fierceness was still in front of his eyes. Yan Xianlu's gaze became stern, and he said, "Brother Shan, if you have a disagreement about this, you may leave immediately. There is no need for you to be derisive and snide. However, I can tell you that you will definitely regret that action." Shan Jitong faltered, showing an expression of hesitation. Should he immediately leave without a backward glance, or stay and listen? If he stayed, that would be a little embarrassing for him, but Yan Xianlu actually declared something like he would regret it if he left. Then, he had to be very certain of that. Monarch tears like them would definitely not blurt nonsense in this kind of situation. After hesitating for a long time, Shan Jitong still chose to sit back down on the rock he was initially perched on. He had made his decision. He was definitely not going to speak again later on. Even if Shan Jitong had embarrassed himself, how could the others dare to laugh at him? They all remained expressionless, acting as if they had not seen anything. Only Lao Song smirked coldly, expressing his contempt for Shan Jitong. "How fun!" Hu Niu meanwhile clapped, her voice crisp and cheery. Shan Jitong only acted as if he had not heard her. He closed his eyes. What the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. Everyone clicked their tongues in amazement. It was as if Yan Xianlu and Shan Jitong had both repressed themselves in the treatment of this young girl, which made the others even more curious. Who exactly was this young girl? This time, Yan Xianlu was a little thankful to Hu Niu. Even he could not possibly completely suppress Shan Jitong, but Hu Niu could. True enough, a fierce person needed another fierce person to deal with him. The celestial realm is colossal. Merely the boundless seas have separated the Eastern Celestial Realm and Western Celestial Realm, and our Eastern Celestial Realm is further divided into 33 heavens. Yan Xianlu began to explain some geographical information. Because of this, some showed expressions of impatience. Had they come to listen to this? But there were also many others whose expressions did not change. How could it be possible that those who could become top-notch emperor tiers did not even have this little bit of patience? Moreover, would Yan Xianlu talk about this for no reason? Our calm peace heaven, to be honest, can only be ranked at the bottom of the 33 heavens, having the same rank as wide prosperity heaven and far west heaven, Yan Xianlu stated calmly. When the overall level of strength of the Western Celestial Realm is also superior to the Eastern Celestial Realms, our calm peace heaven can only be ranked last in the entire Celestial Realm. Some time ago, I decided to travel around in the Western Celestial Realm, but in the end, I did not embark on the journey. Instead, I went to the wide prosperity heaven, and decided to train there first. In the end, I encountered an opponent that I was no match for. All of a sudden, the masses erupted in uproar. Who was Yan Xianlu? A divine fetus that was born on the celestial path, a being that very possibly could have been birthed from heaven and nurtured by earth. He should have been an ultimate monarch tier that was invincible among his peers, so how could he have possibly been defeated? Brother Yan, it must be that opponent's cultivation level is too high, right? Someone immediately piped up with a smile, hoping against hope. Yan Xianlu shook his head, and replied, "That's not the case. That person was the same as me, a fifth severance as well." When these words left his mouth, everyone was silenced. Shan Jitong opened his mouth to speak, but ultimately could not say anything. He was very defiant, yet had a good measure of himself. His battle prowess should be inferior compared to Yan Xianlu's, so if even Yan Xianlu was no match, what was he worth then? Lao Song was much calmer. Only his flirtatious eyes became even narrower, making him look more like a poisonous serpent. "That person's name is Xueqi," Yan Xianlu continued. "According to him in the wide prosperity heaven, he can only be ranked 9th in terms of strength." Pooh, a considerable number spluttered. Impossible. Definitely impossible. With how strong Yan Xianlu was, he had actually been defeated by someone who was merely ranked 9th in the wide prosperity heaven. How could this be believed? Chapter 1927. Fiery flame lightning strike wood. Even Ling Han was interested now. Yan Xianlu's strength was undoubted, but this kind of powerful prodigy was actually no match for someone that only ranked 9th in another place. That was a little hard to imagine. Most importantly, Yan Xianlu had been exaggerated too much. Just how many people could be intimidated by merely the words of being born on the celestial path? Added with the fact that he was a true disciple of an 8th heaven celestial king, and was qualified to attain the 9th heaven in the future, his defeat was unthinkable and unacceptable. It should be known that Yan Xianlu had always been considered as the strongest in the severing mundane tier. In fact, once he advanced into the dividing soul tier, he would not need too long to be considered as the strongest below the immortal palace tier. Lao Song couldn't help but ask, Brother Yan, the wide prosperity heaven is actually that strong? The celestial realm was so huge, and merely the Compice heaven was enough for someone to spend tens of billions of years exploring. Which of the young prodigies gathered here had not passed the age of 1,000,000,000? Regarding the wide prosperity heaven, all they knew about it was hearsay. Yan Xianlu nodded and replied, that is indeed the case. How could that be? Shan Jitong also broke the silence. The wide prosperity heaven is ranked equal with our Compice heaven. There is practically no difference in the overall level of cultivation. How could such a massive disparity appear in this generation? Yan Xianlu shook his head and answered, I am not sure. My master has probably guessed the reason, but when I asked about it, master's expression was extremely solemn, and he said that the wide prosperity heaven has made a very great sacrifice for the celestial realm, so it was not strange that they would be boosted by fortune in this way. Everyone heard this, and inadvertently was even more confused. What did having made a great sacrifice for the celestial realm mean? What was the sacrifice? Furthermore, how had they sacrificed themselves? It was all completely baffling. But would the eternal prosperity celestial king speak random nonsense? They didn't understand what he meant by sacrifice, but at least they understood that the reason why so many prodigies had appeared in this generation of wide prosperity heaven was because they had been boosted by fortune from heaven and earth. For example, a few more divine fetuses had appeared, and they were all super divine fetuses, like time element and space element. In fact, there were some that had both. Hence, in a battle of equals, they would definitely have a greater advantage. In fact, after Celestial King tier, everyone's cultivation level would be the same. For example, if they were both at second heaven, yet you grasped 3 types of regulations, which was equivalent to 3 second heaven celestial kings, then you would definitely be stronger than they who only grasped 1 type of celestial king tier regulations. Regulations were the strongest weapon that a celestial had. Brother Yan, the reason why you have invited us here is to stand off against the wide prosperity heaven, someone asked. When they heard so much, everyone could guess at some clue. Yan Xianlu shook his head, but then nodded and answered yes and no. He continued, close to 100 million years ago, my master discovered a mystery realm that was naturally formed from heaven and earth, and within, there was a source power of heaven and earth that was being nurtured. Furthermore, it is close to maturity. He paused for a moment. As expected, he saw everyone's breath quicken in excitement. Source power of heaven and earth could be said to be a treasure that was the most valuable in the whole world. Even a celestial king would be tempted. Allowing one to observe the regulations of heaven and earth from an endlessly close distance was very significant for those who had not reached the celestial king tier. Furthermore, a source power could help one in battle. The strength of it would depend on the situation because while a source power of heaven and earth was celestial king tier in level, it could possibly be only first heaven in level, but could also possibly reach 9th heaven. In summary, if one could obtain a source power of heaven and earth in the severing mundane tier, that would be too terrifying. Because this source power of heaven and earth was still being nurtured, my master did not retrieve it. Furthermore, after my master did some observation, he discovered that this natural mystery realm was extremely frightening. Aside from a 9th heaven celestial king being able to barge in by force, even if an existence like an 8th heaven celestial king dared to be rash, he would still be killed by heaven and earth. Not only are celestial kings bound by this restriction, even the ascending origin tier, immortal palace tier, and dividing soul tier elites have no way of entering. It is as if the heaven and earth are biased, and wish to gift this fortune only to severing mundane tiers. When Yan Xianlu finished saying these words, he very naturally discovered everyone showed an expression of excitement that could not be suppressed. Even Lao Song and Shan Jitong could not hide their excitement. Brother Yan, I fear the matter is not as simple as that, right? Ling Han spoke up. If this source power of heaven and earth could be so easily obtained, then what need was there for Yan Xianlu to inform them? He could directly go by himself to retrieve it. Moreover, why had he deliberately spoken of the wide prosperity heaven just now? There was no one stupid here, and they all came to the realization. Yan Xianlu nodded slowly, and answered, "That's right. There is also a celestial king from wide prosperity heaven that has discovered this natural mystery realm, and also found out that this source power of heaven and earth exists. Thus, when the mystery realm opens, the wide prosperity heaven will also be contesting with us for it." Hearing these words, everyone's expressions changed. Previously, Yan Xianlu had already said that even the severing mundane tier ranked 9th in wide prosperity heaven could defeat him. Then even if Yan Xianlu was ranked 10th, there were actually so many heaven-defying freaks in the whole wide prosperity heaven. Then what was the point of contesting? "Thus we have to unite," Yan Xianlu said. "I have a formation technique with me that can be used by 10 people. When it channels, not only can it compound upon the battle prowess of all 10 users, it can even increase their battle prowess tenfold. Compound, tenfold." When everyone heard this, they all looked tempted. That so-called Xueqi definitely could not be 10 times stronger than Yan Xianlu. In fact, even the strongest prodigy of the wide prosperity heaven could not possibly be so powerful. Furthermore, Yan Xianlu was not the only one whose power would be compounded tenfold, but rather it was the united power of the 10 of them. If they really had this kind of formation, there would be no enemy they could not overcome, no battle they could not win. "Brother Yan, then after obtaining the source power of heaven and earth, how is it to be shared?" someone asked. Because Yan Xianlu, Shan Jitong, and Lao Song were all monarch tiers, who could be a match for them in the severing mundane tier? Yan Xianlu smiled faintly, and replied, "How could you retrieve a source power of heaven and earth just because you willed it? It will choose its master on its own. If there is no suitable candidate, it will evade and escape, and there is no possible way that we can compel it by force. Thus, we are only earning a chance for ourselves to appear in front of the source power of heaven and earth, so it could make its choice. This will have to depend on how lucky you are." Ling Han asked, "Brother Yan, after talking for so long, what exactly is this source power of heaven and earth?" He already had the source powers of water and fire. If he obtained another source power of heaven and earth of the same elemental alignment, while it would still increase his battle prowess by some, it would not give rise to a fundamental change. Small Tower had said that he should gather as many source powers of heaven and earth as possible before advancing into the Celestial King tier. If he advanced into the Celestial King tier under such conditions, he would be able to rush up to astonishing heights. Thus, if this source power of heaven and earth was of any other element aside from water and fire, he would try as much as possible to make an attempt for it. If it was not, his enthusiasm would be greatly decreased. Furthermore, Yan Xianlu had not spoken wrongly. A source power of heaven and earth could not be simply retrieved just because you wanted to, but rather it would have to depend on whether the source power itself was willing to follow by your side or otherwise. Ling Han already had 2 source powers of heaven and earth in his body. If the third one was still water or fire, the chances of it choosing Ling Han would probably be close to 0. Similarities would repel each other. Yan Xianlu cast a second look at Ling Han. What he was concerned about was not Ling Han's strength, but rather Huanyan's sweet attitude towards Ling Han. Huanyan was too powerful, reminding him of the heaven-defying freaks of wide prosperity heaven. He slowly answered, "This source power of heaven and earth is of the wood element, the fiery flame lightning strike wood." How strange. Since it was wood element, why was it fiery flame and lightning strike as well? Chapter 1928. A mere alchemist. The fiery flame lightning strike wood is born with much suffering. In the process of its growth, it would continuously be burnt by fiery flames and struck by lightning, Yan Xianlu explained. Speaking of numbers, the amount of fiery flame lightning strike wood should number the most amongst all source powers. When a fiery flame lightning strike wood dies, countless fiery flame lightning strike would be birthed. However, they would only be young sprouts, and in the meantime, countless of them would die, right until one has successfully grown, and the other sprouts would also wilt and die at the same time. This is a source power of heaven and earth. Thus, even if you can't obtain the approval of the fiery flame lightning strike wood, even if you can only obtain a wilted sprout of fiery flame lightning strike wood, it will be of incredible help for us to comprehend the regulations of wood. He paused and then continued, "What my master discovered was not a single fiery flame lightning strike wood, but rather a whole area, a forest of fiery flame lightning strike wood. A forest made up of fiery flame lightning strike wood, and only one king would stand out among the rest, and become the new source power of heaven and earth." Hearing him say so, Those whose enthusiasm was not that high initially all became keen. It was too difficult to have a source power of heaven and earth recognize them as its master basically. Only a celestial king could accomplish that. But if they could get a wilted sprout of the fiery flame lightning strike wood, that was indeed also a precious treasure. It was guaranteed that every single ascending origin tier would go mad for it. Ling Han, do you want it? Huanian asked from within Ling Han's arms. Niu will snatch it for you. Her eyes shone, not much different from the little girl she had once been. Ling Han involuntarily laughed loudly. Thinking of his various experiences with Huanian, an indescribable feeling of bliss rose up in his heart. I want to join. I want to join as well. Immediately, a great many people volunteered themselves, wanting to join Yan Xianlu's team. Though Shan Jitong and Lao Song were also incredibly tempted, because of their dignified conduct, they did not say it out loud. Instead, they were waiting for Yan Xianlu to take the initiative to invite them. Yet it was as if Yan Xianlu had not picked up on that, and completely ignored their existence. Basically, every person expressed their wish to go to that natural mystery realm. It was not everyone that Yan Xianlu would accept. This formation was capable of compounding the power of 10 people, in fact, and increased their power by tenfold on that basis even. Thus, it would definitely put a tremendous pressure on every single person. Without the support of a powerful physique, there would be no need for their opponent to break the formation, as they themselves would crumble first. As the saying went, better to have nothing than to settle for inferiority. After deliberating for a long while, Yan Xianlu had still only picked out 6 people. Finally, Shan Jitong and Lao Song showed a prideful expression. No matter how strong you, Yan Xianlu, were, you ultimately would still have to offer them an invitation. Miss, are you interested in coming with us? Yan Xianlu turned to look at Huanian, issuing an invite. Niu doesn't want to. Huanian scowled, glaring at Yan Xianlu. If you dare have ideas about Niu will chop off your dog's head to feed the dogs. Ling Han broke out in a sweat. Wasn't that cannibalism? Yan Xianlu, having courted a rebuff, could only rub his nose. However, Huanian was indeed very powerful, and very likely wasn't inferior to Xueqi. Without relying on the formation, she could still match him. However, no matter what, Huanian was still from the calm peace heaven, so even if she did not join his team, it was still fine. My master has said that this is an opportunity that belongs to every single person from the calm peace heaven. Thus, I will bring everyone with me when I go. After entering into the mystery realm, I hope everyone can help one another. After all, our enemy is the wide prosperity heaven. Yan Xianlu solemnly declared, if I discover anyone taking the initiative to start internal strife in the mystery realm, then please do not fault me for turning hostile in the future. Naturally. Everyone nodded. At present, they were all competitors, but if there was the wide prosperity heaven thrown into the bundle, then they were a whole unit. Their fists should be united against a common external enemy. Brother Yan, could I give you a hand? Lao Song was the first to soften. Yan Xianlu had already raised the topic to the level of the big picture of the entire calm peace heaven. In comparison, his reservedness naturally would appear only coy. Of course, Yan Xianlu said smilingly. Brother Yan, I as well. Shan Jitong could only pipe in, disregarding any notion of embarrassment. Yan Xianlu nodded, and did not pursue the matter or mock Yan Xianlu. He had lofty ambitions, and disdained using such tactics to strike a blow at an opponent. Moreover, he was already the strongest of the younger generation of the calm peace heaven, and there was no need for him to treat Shan Jitong as a rival, either. His target was the other 33 ultimate monarch tiers of the Eastern Celestial Realm. Huanian was not willing to join, which made Yan Xianlu slightly disappointed. If one such elite could join their alliance, his chances of victory would be greatly increased. However, looking at how Huanian was clinging on to Ling Han, he decided to take a more roundabout route. Ling Han, we finally met. He smiled faintly. Ling Han nodded and said, I have heard of you, and you haven't disappointed me either. Hiss, hearing these words from Ling Han, everyone inhaled sharply. What a great boast. As a mere alchemist, where did you get courage to be so arrogant? Yan Xianlu involuntarily became slightly angered as well. Though Zhao Qingfeng had not been killed by Ling Han's hand, it could still be considered Ling Han's fault. Having a subordinate killed, with his personality of protecting his own people, Yan Xianlu was actually already very displeased with Ling Han. However, Ling Han was too young, having astonishing natural talent in alchemy, and his potential in cultivation wasn't too bad, either. That was why he had invited him, as he wished to recruit Ling Han. As he saw it, now that he, the king of the younger generation of the Compiece Heaven, had extended him an olive branch, Ling Han naturally would only scramble over and gladly agree. Now that he had Huanian backing him up, he had forgotten himself. "Are you willing to join my team?" he asked lowly, and he was asking for Huanian's sake. Ling Han broke into a grin, and replied, "My temper is a little stubborn. As the saying goes, better be the head of a chicken rather than the tail of a bull. Come, let us have a match. If I win, you all will join me, and I will be your leader." He really wasn't afraid of being forced to eat his own words. But Yan Xianlu was not angered. As he saw it, Ling Han was only an arrogant fool. There was completely no need to take the words of a psycho to heart. He calmly asked, "If you lose? Then I'll just leave without a backwards look." "I already said that I won't be the tail of a bull," Ling Han said with a smile. Everyone was taken aback. "So whichever way, others should listen to you." "Ling Han's so awesome." Huanian planted a kiss on Ling Han's cheek happily. On the sidelines, the Empress similarly had an expression of pride. How could her husband possibly be under someone else's command? What a joke. Yan Xianlu also faltered. "You are really too shameless, aren't you?" His expression darkened, and he replied, "Fine, then let us exchange a few moves." He wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson so that he knew that using powerful connections as an intimidation tactic was a very disgraceful thing. Ling Han patted Huanian's back, indicating for her to let go of him. No, you can just fight," while embracing Nyo like this. Huanian did not want to let go of her bare hug of Ling Han. At this moment, she did not want to leave Ling Han for even a single instant. Ling Han thought for a while, and just simply walked out like that. For someone that had reached the cultivation level he had, to say nothing of the fact that he had a person in his arms, even if he was carrying 10,000 people, it practically wouldn't affect his battle prowess. Since the little girl was begging like this, he should just satisfy this little wish of hers. "Come." Ling Han crooked a finger at Yan Xianlu. This was issuing a challenge to the strongest person in the severing mundane tier? He was really too relaxed. However, Yan Xianlu did not dare to be careless. He was well aware of how powerful Huanian could be. If she interfered in the match, the chances of him being defeated were very high. Chapter 1929. Even an alchemist can be that strong. Yan Xianlu strode out, his embroidered robes fluttering. While he was not world-shakingly handsome, his demeanor was graceful and poised, and others could only stare in admiration. Initially, this was a very solemn matter, but there was actually a slender young girl that was hanging on to Yan Xianlu's opponent like she was a koala. No matter how they looked at it, this was a very comical scene. "Did you really want to battle?" Yan Xianlu's expression was dark. At first, his plans were perfect, gathering the united forces of all the prodigies, and unlocking the celestial fortune. He would first obtain the celestial king achieving Dao Stone, and after refining it, he would improve his physique, and then lead everyone on a charge to the mystery realm to contest for the source power of heaven and earth. Obtaining a source power of heaven and earth would mean that he really did not have to fear anyone of the same cultivation level. However, things had gone wrong right from the start. Though he had very quickly suppressed his disappointment, it could not possibly be forgotten just like that. Though it was Huanian who had obtained the celestial stone, when it came to the root of the matter, it was actually Ling Han's fault. If it was not for Ling Han's sake, how could Huanian have come here? Old grudges and new resentment made Yan Xianlu especially despise the villain that Ling Han was. Putting on pretenses and using powerful connections as intimidation tactics. He raised his hand level. Wang, the air in the surroundings vibrated, forming a transparent sword in his hand. Only because of the reflection of light did one manage to see clearly the existence of this sword. Ling Han smiled faintly, one arm holding onto Huanian, while his other hand pushed forwards. His 4 fingers curled inwards into a fist, leaving only a thumb pressing out towards Yan Xianlu. After advancing into the 5th severance, he was his own universe, and every slightest move was his strongest attack. Go! Yan Xianlu slashed out the sword. Abruptly, a brilliance that filled the skies streaked out, dazzling the 9 heavens. Ling Han maintained his move of pressing out his thumb. The millions and millions of stars in his body glowed simultaneously, and he could simply draw on great Tao with a stretch of his hand. As his thumb pressed down, the heaven and earth resonated, turning into a dragon, and then a phoenix appeared. The dragon and phoenix danced together, greeting the incoming sword light. Boom! The sword light crashed into the dragon and phoenix, unleashing an incredibly brilliant light. It was as if a sun had been formed, dazzling the world. When the light completely dispersed, Yan Xianlu and Ling Han were still standing opposite each other. Neither had taken a step back, and neither of them had any sign of being injured. What? Seeing this scene, everyone exploded with shock. Ling Han was actually a match for Yan Xianlu. Hiss, Yan Xianlu was a monarch tier. The 5th severance was much too difficult. In the entire Compi's heaven, there were at least a few hundred celestial king tier sects, and there were close to 20 of 5th heaven and above celestial king tier sects too. As for monarch tiers, at least in the present generation of severing mundane tiers, there were only a mere 3 people who had accomplished it. Monarch tiers naturally should be invincible in the world. However, it was now very possible that a 4th monarch tier had appeared. It was not just very possible, but rather definite. Otherwise, no matter how strong he was, a 4th severance could not possibly take an attack from a 5th severance. That would definitely be a one-sided battle. Realization dawned on everyone. No wonder Ling Han dared to be so arrogant. A monarch tier naturally would be unyielding and obstinate. But weren't you an alchemist? Even an alchemist could be that strong. Fuck! Yan Xianlu's eyes lit up. He was not envious because he had another monarch tier rival. Instead, his fighting spirit blazed brightly. In fact, he felt a kind of gratification. The Compi's heaven was too strong, and there was an urgent need for a few monarch tiers to appear. In the future, only then would it be possible for more celestial kings to appear high-level celestial kings. Otherwise, with how fierce the competition was like in the celestial realm, it was possible that the Compi's heaven would be invaded by other forces, which would lead to a reshuffling of the power balance. Good. Yan Xianlu exclaimed lightly. I previously thought that you were just condescending. It seems like I have had a mistaken opinion of you. I apologize. Ling Han smiled and replied, at first, I too, thought you were an arrogant person, and now I too, take back this kind of opinion. You are not too bad yourself. The two of them exchanged a smile, feeling like they would not have befriended if they had not fought. After all, people of talent appreciate one another. There were too few monarch tiers. Every single one could be a very good rival and close friend. Ling Han, don't waste words with him. Defeat him quickly. Niu still wants to kiss with you. Niu wrapped her arms around Ling Han's neck, declaring without the slightest notion of embarrassment. She was upright and bold, saying whatever came to mind. Ling Han could only shrug and said, Brother Yan, then let us set the limit at 10 move. His impression of Yan Xianlu had changed greatly, so he naturally no longer felt the determination to defeat and stomp on him. All right, 10 moves. Yan Xianlu nodded. He was indeed very proud, but he was a good judge of character as well. What need was there for him to lower himself to deal with emperor tiers and king tiers? Only those who were similarly monarch tiers like him were worthy of being treated as equal by him. This was actually very normal. Ling Han moved, his figure charging out like a shooting star. Yan Xianlu did not show any weakness, either, launching himself into a clash with Ling Han. Pang pang pang. Hong, hong, hong. Neither of them held anything back, using one celestial technique after another, and showing fully the strongest facet of themselves. 10 moves very quickly passed, and the two of them stopped at the same time. Exchanging a smile, their old grudges had been wiped clean. This was a kind of appreciation that men had for another that was their equal. Let's descend the peak. They walked side by side, heading towards the foot of the mountain. Because there were no manifestations coming out to cause trouble, their speed naturally was not slow. After 10 days, they had already arrived at the foot of the mountain. Kakaka, brat, you think you can escape from me? Amidst a series of mad cackles, an elder suddenly appeared. Boom, an endless pressure spread out, alerting all 33 heavens. The expressions of all the prodigies changed slightly. They were all emperor tiers and monarch tiers within the same cultivation level, but that was only limited to the same cultivation level. Even if monarch tiers could match Yang's soul or even Yin's soul, this elder presently was definitely not a dividing soul tier, but had rather far surpassed that. However, while everyone was shocked, none of them was afraid at all. This was a gathering that was hosted by Yan Xianlu, and there was an 8th heaven celestial king standing behind Yan Xianlu. If someone still came to cause trouble at this kind of gathering, how could Yan Xianlu and the eternal prosperity celestial king tolerate it with their pride? If this elder wanted to make a move, a celestial king would definitely appear and crush him into dust. Ling Han's eyes narrowed, and he declared, "Old demon blood shadow. Brat, I indeed did not have a wrong opinion of you. Initially, I had thought you would need 10 million years to be able to get the natural peach seal out for me. I had not thought that it would only take just a few years. Not bad, and now, hand it over to me." Old demon blood shadow declared, his face filled with anticipation. Anyone would be afraid of death. What more this kind of mighty figure that was placed on a high pedestal? He had suffered greatly from the immortal's tribulation, and the next time it came, he would definitely be done for. Hence, he naturally longed incredibly for the natural peach seal, causing even him, a noble ascending origin tier, to lose his composure. Ling Han shrugged and replied, "Sorry, it was already used." "You used?" Old demon blood shadow stuttered. His first reaction was disbelief and inability to accept this fact. That was because he had placed all his hopes of survival on this, and suddenly hearing this abrupt announcement, his whole head had exploded. Then, he flew into a thunderous rage. "Brat, you actually dare to deceive me. You don't want your life anymore?" His gaze was menacing, exuding a strong killing intent. This brat actually dared to fool him. How could he be so outrageously bold? Right at this moment, a figure suddenly charged out, delivering a palm strike towards Ling Han. Zzz. Boundless lightning flickered brightly, its strength incredibly frightening. Ba Yao! He had already been waiting a very long time for Ling Han. The moment he saw Ling Han, he immediately made his move. He did not need that natural peach seal, so his attack was fatal, planning to kill Ling Han so that he could directly snatch the treasure that the latter possessed. Chapter 1930. Something wrong with the picture. "How dare you!" Old demon blood shadow roared furiously, and he moved to attack Ba Yao. It was not that he treasured Ling Han's life, but rather because he did not know whether Ling Han had brought the natural peach seal out with him or not. If he had brought it out, then it was fine to kill Ling Han as he would simply have to take it. But if he had not, and it was still within Alchemy City, then what was the point of him going to so much trouble and effort? Moreover, he too suspected that Ling Han had a rare treasure in his possession. He had long since decided to kill Ling Han after he had gotten hold of the natural peach seal, and take all the great fortune that the latter had for himself, so he naturally could not possibly allow Ling Han to die in the hands of another. Thus, he immediately moved, and was extremely ruthless. Ba Yao paused slightly. This old bastard actually dared to make a move on him. "Have your damn eyes gone blind? Do you know who I am?" "You're courting death," he exclaimed coldly, and paid old demon blood shadow back with a punch of his own. Zzz. Lightning burst, turning into an extended river of electricity, countless seals of great Tao rippling within, frightening without bounds. Old demon blood shadow paled in shock. They were both ascending origin tiers, but the gap between him and the other was practically indescribably wide. Pang! With this blow, old demon blood shadow was sent flying. Pooh! His whole figure sprayed out a mist of blood, his aura declining continuously. He had merely reached small accomplishment in the ascending origin tier, but Ba Yao had reached consummate, and the gap between them was completely beyond logic. Old demon blood shadow fell, and barely managed to steady his footing. His gray hair all wafted down to the ground. Initially, his hair was already scarce, and now his head had completely become bare, and he had become a baldy. His face was frighteningly pale, and his left eye was bulging out of his eye socket, appearing very ghastly. Puh! He threw up blood continuously, while his hair continued to drop. Lightning would be flickering in every mouthful of blood. This was because Ba Yao's attack was too terrifying and had penetrated deep into his bones. Old demon Blood Shadow couldn't help but pale in astonishment. In the first place, because of the immortal's tribulation, his blood essence was already dried up. From the dashing handsome young man he had once been, he had become the old geezer he was now. And now, Ba Yao had directly damaged his life force with this blow. Every mouthful of blood he spat out was equivalent to him expending a sliver of his life force, and the old wounds that had resulted from the immortal's tribulation were also restless, beginning to tear away at his cultivation. His aura suddenly dropped madly, from the ascending origin tier to immortal palace tier, 5th palace, 4th palace, 3rd palace. And it did not stop even when it had dropped to the 1st palace, dropping suddenly to the dividing soul tier, and falling further from heaven's soul. Was this too much of an exaggeration? Not in the slightest. The consummate of ascending origin tier possessed the ability to kill a small accomplishment with a single strike in the first place, and while it had only been a casual strike from Ba Yao, how could one who had once been a holy son of the Thundercloud Palace be underestimated? Furthermore, old demon Blood Shadow was close to the finishing line of his lifespan, so how close could his present battle prowess be to the battle prowess he had in his prime? He had not been directly killed with a single strike. Instead, his cultivation level had declined, and this was already very, very good. Old demon Blood Shadow's cultivation level dropped all the way until the middle stage of Ian's soul, and only then did he barely stop it. His limbs were all numb, an endless despair rising up within him. True, cultivation levels could be recultivated, and he could still cultivate from Ian's soul to Earth soul, Heaven soul and all the way onwards. However, his life force was wounded once more. So how much longer did he have to live? 100 years? 10,000 years? Before he had reached the ascending origin tier, and broken through the great accomplishment level, made up for the lack of his life force, and regained an endless lifespan, he would have long since died. Which also meant that while Ba Yao had not killed him with this blow, it had already announced a death sentence for him. Old demon Blood Shadow trembled. 100 million years would pass very soon, and it was possible that his current lifespan wasn't even up to 100 years, so how could he not tremble in fear? This seemed to be a very long time, but in truth was only the matter of 1 or 2 breaths. The process of their clash was even faster and astonishing, and severing mundane tears practically could not distinguish clearly. What had happened? Everyone was a little stunned. Why did they feel like something was off with this picture? Hadn't the old demon Blood Shadow come to cause trouble for Ling Han? Why had he turned around and attacked on his behalf? And he had come out of it so badly at that. This was definitely true love. Ba Yao only cast a calm look at old demon Blood Shadow before withdrawing his gaze. Though the latter was also an ascending origin tier, he was just a minor character in his eyes. Aside from an ascending origin tier that had come out from a celestial king tier force, who else was worth his serious notice? He had overestimated his own capabilities. He did not eradicate him, either. Even killing this kind of trash was merely a waste of his time. What you have, I am very interested in, Ba Yao said, staring at Ling Han. At first, Ba Yao had not wanted to waste words, and just wanted to directly kill Ling Han and snatch the treasure. After he plucked the latter's soul, there was no possibility that any secret could be hidden, but since he had now been stopped, and failed the first time, he would be frank and generous, unrushed and calm. After all, he was an ascending origin tier, so he still treasured his reputation. If he had succeeded with the previous blow, he would have directly left. He had absolute certainty that even Yan Xianlu had no hopes of distinguishing his appearance clearly and remembering his aura. So what? Ling Han asked smilingly, without the slightest sign of being afraid. Whatever they are, they now belong to me, Ba Yao stated calmly. Soundlessly, he had already locked the space in this area. This way, unless a celestial king deliberately swept his divine sense in this area, there was no possible way that anyone could discover what happened here. This way, everything would be under his control. Ling Han shook his head. I don't think so. Brat, do you still think that this is Alchemy City? Ba Yao scoffed. There were too many heirs of celestial kings here. In fact, there was also a super prodigy like Yan Xianlu here. He naturally did not dare to commit murder randomly. But in Ling Han's case, he knew him very well. He was only a mere holy son of Alchemy City. So what if he killed him? Even if Alchemy City went off to the Thundercloud Palace to make a complaint, so what? What could they do to him? What a joke. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "This is indeed not Alchemy City, and my master is not here to stand up for me. However, there are really a lot of interesting and amazing things that would happen in this world." "Oh, like?" Ba Yao asked carelessly as he strode towards Ling Han. His speed was not very fast, but every step he took was like great Tao pressing down, causing an indescribable discomfort to everyone's heart and internal organs. How was a severing mundane tear any match for the might of an ascending origin tear? He deliberately walked very slowly. That was because previously in Alchemy City, he had been forced away by Grandmaster Zicheng, and this was a humiliation to him. Now, though he was not seeking vengeance from alchemist Zicheng, Ling Han was the fundamental root of the whole issue. Before he killed him, he would torture him a bit, and this was slightly pleasing to him. Of course, this was completely because he had absolute certainty. Otherwise, he would have directly killed him, plucked out his soul, snatched the treasure, and left. Tong, tong, tong. One step after another, a considerable number immediately showed expressions of suffering. They felt as if their internal organs were about to explode. That was really the case. Under such terrifying pressure, every person's eyeballs were popping out, their expressions frighteningly twisted. "Damn it!" Huanian was furious, pointing a finger at Ba Yao. "Damn giant, you actually dare be fierce to Nio's Ling Han, and dare to make Nio feel discomfort. You are dead." Ba Yao naturally would not take Huanian's threat seriously. He only scoffed, and the eyes he turned towards Huanian were slightly devious. He had never been one to abstain from women, especially now when he had been stagnating on ascending origin tier for too long. He had developed a great many hobbies, and the pleasures of the flesh naturally were one of them. Furthermore, it occupied a great portion of his time even. This young girl was both beautiful and pure. Though she was a little fierce, what use was that in front of him? "Oh, I am dead." Ba Yao shook his head. "I don't believe it." "You should." An icy cold voice rang out behind Ba Yao, holding a menacing killing intent. Chapter 1931. A Meaningless Death. Ba Yao was involuntarily astonished, and hurriedly turned around, seeing that a middle-aged beauty had unknowingly appeared behind him. All of a sudden, coldness rose up in his body as he felt every single hair rise on end. Impossible! He was an ascending origin tier elite, the strongest existence below Celestial King tier, but he was actually completely unaware that a person had appeared behind him, so how could he not be dumbfounded? "Who are you?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. "Are you even worthy to ask?" Lu Herong asked calmly, her voice icy cold. This idiot actually dared to be insolent to her young imperial empress. Just how tired was he of living? "Nio wants to smack him." Huanian cried out, appearing incredibly indignant and infuriated. "You actually dare threaten Nio's Ling Han. Nio wants to beat you up into a pig's head, and then feed you to the dogs." Though she was still as violent as she had been, Ling Han breathed a slight sigh of relief. At least, this line was slightly more normal. She was no longer declaring wanting to feed a dog's head to the dogs. Lu Herong had completely no need to move at all. She only gave a light humph, and boom, the pressure of a celestial king that could move the 9 heavens surged out. Involuntarily, Ba Yao's legs weakened, and he knelt. Whatever previous holy son, consummate of ascending origin tier. In front of a celestial king, this was all trash. Ba Yao felt his whole body covered in cold sweat. He was really terrified now. All the prodigies also scared in amazement. They were all from celestial king tier level backgrounds, and it was not unusual that this had led to the arrival of a celestial king. However, celestial kings were the strongest existence in the celestial realm. Which of them was not an overwhelmingly proud ruler with their own domain? But looking at Huanian's previous attitude, it was as if she was commanding a subordinate. "Just who exactly are you? You are a little too extravagant, aren't you? Having a celestial king follow you even on your travels?" Old Demon Bloodshadow also forgot to moan. He looked dumbly at Huanian, and then looked at Ling Han, tremendous regret rising up in his heart. Ling Han actually had such a terrifying background. He felt like everything was so surreal. This was too unfathomable. Since you were so awesome, why had you gone to become the holy son of Alchemy City? Though Alchemy City was indeed very awesome, it could only take a leading role among 4-star forces at most, and barely could be considered a 5-star force of the lowest rank. Were you pretending to be a wolf in sheep's clothing? You screwed me over. He did not reflect on himself in the slightest, that it was he who had taken the initiative to trifle with Ling Han. Instead, he laid the blame for all the misfortune he had suffered on Ling Han, and thought that all of this was Ling Han's fault. With Huanyan's personality, she was naturally not going to be reserved about anything. She leaped over and sent a kick straight at Ba Yao's face, kicking Ba Yao onto the ground. Then she stomped on him madly. She was furious. This guy not only dared to threaten Ling Han, but dared to have ideas about her beyond his station. This definitely could not be tolerated. Nyo was Ling Han's. Stomp, 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 Nyo will stomp him dead. Ba Yao's cultivation level had been sealed off by Liu Herong. He could not possibly fight back. There was only a sliver of power left that was protecting his vitals. Thus, while he was battered and bruised from Huanyan's kicks, his wound still immediately recovered. As long as there was not someone else's martial intent left in his body, every celestial could very quickly heal their physical body. In this way, he had become a perfect bullseye, allowing Huanyan to vent her anger as much as she liked without being broken. But while he would not break, it still hurt. Did you think an ascending origin tier felt no pain? Ba Yao screamed out in pain. Every stomp from Huanyan's foot would result in a groove in his flesh. If there were bones beneath the flesh, his bones would definitely be broken. If it was an internal organ, the internal organ would also be crushed. See if Nyo won't kill you. Huanyan cursed as she continued to kick, looking completely like a little psycho. Everyone turned their gaze elsewhere. An incredibly exquisite beauty could actually be so violent. Even Liu Herong could not bear to watch any longer. With a wave of her hand, Celestial King tier regulations surged, and Ba Yao's bones were directly crushed into dust that was blown away with the winds. He had turned into nothing, not even the slightest bit of him left behind. She had no wish for her young Imperial Empress to show how violent she could be in front of others again, so it was naturally best to eliminate Ba Yao directly. This Ba Yao had really died a meaningless death. If you could not bear watching, then wouldn't it be fine for you to just stop Huanyan? Why did you kill him? So how meaningless was his death? Everyone was looking at Liu Herong in astonishment. This was a celestial king, and even though she was only first heaven, she was still a supremely noble existence in front of them. In fact, a celestial king was a supreme noble wherever they were. Greetings, senior. All the prodigies bowed in respect. Even Yen Xianlu was no exception. This was the respect that an absolute elite deserved. If it was not for the fact that they, too, were heirs of celestial king tier sex, merely bowing was not enough. They would have to kneel to pay their greetings. Young Imperial Empress, can we go back now? Liu Herong looked at Huanyan. This little girl was so obstinate and determined, demanding to come out to find Ling Han. Now that she had finally found who she was looking for, her wish fulfilled, they naturally had to return. No. Huanyan wrapped her arms around Ling Han. At present, she was tall and had long legs, so this bear hug abruptly drove Ling Han's head into her breasts, yet she was completely unconcerned. Nyo wants to play with Ling Han. Play, play, play. Liu Herong was speechless. While this young Imperial Empress had the mark of great Tao left behind by their last Imperial Empress, and was practically capable of advancing into 9th Heaven Celestial King tier lying down, this personality of hers really did not look the slightest bit like an elite's. Thankfully, this was the Eastern Celestial Realm, and they had brought a rare treasure with them, so they could conceal their destiny, preventing the predictions of other elites. It should be fine as long as they took extra caution. Then just let young Imperial Empress play around for a while. Otherwise, this girl was definitely capable of doing something more unthinkable. Thinking that, she did not make any further protest. In any case, she would just protect her from the shadows. Additionally, she also had another important mission, and that was to watch over Ling Han to prevent him from bringing ruin to their little princess. Brother Yen, then I will take my leave first. Allow me to return and make some preparations. Someone began to bid farewell to Yen Xianlu. Me too. Me too. Many of them wanted to first return to their own home bases and make some preparations. After all, they were heading to a natural mystery realm. Furthermore, they would be contesting with the prodigies of wide prosperity heaven. All of them could possibly be incredibly terrifying opponents for them. They respectfully bowed towards Lu Herong, and then walked backwards and left. Ling Han looked towards old demon Blood Shadow, anger rising in his heart. Old bastard, you call yourself an ascending origin tier? You actually wanted to launch a sneak attack on me. Is there anyone more shameless than you? He strode over. At first, I had planned to kill a shameless old bastard like you only after advancing into the ascending origin tier. However, from the looks of things, you would not be able to live until then anyways. Let us battle now then. Old demon Blood Shadow's vitality was extremely withered, and he would only be able to live for 100 or so years at most. In fact, it could even be just a few decades. In soul, he could match that. Ling Han presently was equivalent to Yang Soul, but for a monarch tier like himself, how could it be that he did not have tier-surpassing battle prowess? Old demon Blood Shadow stared fixedly at Ling Han, showing a murderous expression. With a celestial king here, he definitely would not be able to get any benefit, but now that Ling Han had delivered himself straight onto his doorstep, this was a chance for him. He could capture Ling Han, and then use him to blackmail the celestial king into handing over some super celestial pill to recover the damage to his life force. And in this way, he would be able to continue living. When this thought popped up, he could not hold back any longer. Boom, a blood shadow spread out, forming a mist behind him, and it was continuously vibrating like it had a life of its own. His cultivation level had indeed dropped, but Ling Han was really too arrogant, actually wanting to match him, Ain Soul, when he himself was only a severing mundane tier. It should be known that there was a major tier separating the two of them. Chapter 1932. Explosion of Fury. Brat, come. Old demon Blood Shadow fluttered the blood shadow behind him, an abnormal rosiness rising up on his pallid face. His life force was greatly damaged. Actually, it was already a great challenge for him just to struggle at death's door. This battle would definitely cause his originally overwhelmingly short lifespan to become ever closer to the finishing lines. But he had already considered this battle as the last hope for his continued survival. Now that he had thrown everything into the gamble, he naturally would not be concerned, either. Capture Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Old bastard, you would only be beat to bursting by my fist. Xiao, his figure charged out, and had already launched a punch in attack. Overestimating your own capabilities. Old demon Blood Shadow was proud. While his cultivation level had fallen, he was still at Ain Soul. Even if one ignored the major tier, he was still 2 minor levels higher than Ling Han. He stretched out his right hand that looked like a withered claw, and grabbed at Ling Han's right wrist. Wang, the stars in Ling Han's body shone, stimulating great Tao, and drawing on the power of regulation. Immediately, an ancient seal appeared on his fist, and from the surface, it looked like a ball of fire. This was a seal of great Tao that had been drawn from the 9 heavens flame, and was celestial king tier in level. What was unfortunate was that Ling Han's cultivation level was too low. This seal of great Tao was also incomplete, and exuded a feeling of ruin. However, an ancient noble aura was subtly surging, shaking the 9 heavens. Old demon Blood Shadow's expression changed drastically. The might of this blow from Ling Han had actually far surpassed his expectations. A severing mundane tier could actually be as strong as this. Hang on. He suddenly recalled a legend. It was said that an ultimate prodigy would be able to break out of the binds of the heaven and earth, and deliver another strike after the 4th severance. 5th severance, capable of matching Yang's soul. This guy was actually the kind of freak that only existed in myths. Old demon Blood Shadow was not to be blamed for being ignorant. Though he was an ascending origin tier, he had always been a loner. There was no great support or background behind him, so how could he possibly know of too many secrets? It was already impressive enough that he could realize that there were still 5th severance prodigies existing in this world. Wang! The grabbing motion of old demon Blood Shadow became slower and slower. That seal on Ling Han's fist had already taken effect, preventing him from invasion, and amidst an intense friction, flames began to burn on his palm. The old bastard was unconcerned, but when he pushed his hand further forwards, he discovered that his right hand was in overwhelming pain. The pain came from being burnt. Fire had not been ignited due to the strong friction. It was rather that the seal that Ling Han had formed had drawn upon the regulations of fire, which burnt his skin. Impossible! Old Demon Blood Shadow paled in shock. Even if Ling Han was a fifth severance, which was equivalent to a Yang Soul Elite, he himself still had the cultivation level of Yin Soul, so how could he possibly be wounded by Ling Han? Old bastard, the only reason why you could bully me was because your cultivation level was much higher than mine. To say nothing of a battle of equals, even if you are 2 levels higher than me, I will still be able to suppress you. Ling Han roared loudly, his figure suddenly charging while brandishing a fist that contained all his fury. The black murderous curse was indeed capable of tempering him, but having it forcibly planted into his body by someone else was naturally a completely different notion. Even though only a few years had passed, adding in the time that he had passed in the time cultivation chamber, that was a few hundred years of time, which meant that he had endured the agony that came when the black murderous curse activated a few hundred times. Every time it activated, Ling Han really wanted to pummel the old demon Blood Shadow. With all these times added together, his fury had also accumulated to the pinnacle, and now he was going to vent his fury to his heart's content. Pang! When his fist punched out, regulations became solid, and countless seals could be seen appearing, incredibly mysterious and profound. Tang tang ting. Both Ling Han and Old Demon Blood Shadow took a few steps back, and then regained their footing. In this exchange, they had both come out in a tie. Old Demon Blood Shadow's expression was very ugly. At present, he had bet all his hopes on Ling Han. He wanted to capture him so he could use him to blackmail a celestial king, but Ling Han was actually so strong that his wishful thinking had completely fallen short. His lifespan was possibly just 100 years, and furthermore, he was presently burning his limited life force to continue the battle. Who knew? He could directly die whilst he was still in the middle of battle. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to die. The old bastard roared. Boom, the blood shadow behind him surged madly, and then turned into a hurricane that blasted towards Ling Han. When it was channeled for a certain distance, this hurricane actually dispersed, turning into black dots that filled the skies. Ling Han's eyes swept over it, and saw that these black dots were actually multiple insects that filled the skies with their numbers, buzzing madly. Each bug did not look much different from a mosquito, but they were considerably bigger, as big as a pinky. They had a long stinger, which was incredibly sharp, and shone with a metallic brilliance. The insects flew all over in the skies, falling down towards Ling Han. And in that short instant, Ling Han was covered by mosquitoes, all of them using their sharp stings to pierce him, wanting to suck his blood. Ling Han did not move. He wanted to see if these things could do anything to his physique. Old Demon Blood Shadow showed a cold smirk. This brat was too arrogant, and had completely no idea that these blood shadow insects were his trump card technique. Furthermore, they could work together with the black murderous curse. While the blood shadow insects were attacking, he would activate the black murderous curse, and it would be a coordinated attack. If you only bothered about the inside of your body, the blood shadow insects would penetrate your body and devour your blood essence. These blood shadow insects were actually formed from his divided soul. Whatever blood essence they sucked could be fed back to him. Though it would not recover his life force, it did have some slight bit of nutrition. And if you were only bothered about the surface of your body, the black murderous curse would similarly be able to take your life. What Old Demon Blood Shadow had to ensure was that he did not activate the black murderous curse too powerfully in a moment of carelessness, and directly kill Ling Han off. If he did, he would not be able to blackmail that celestial king. Explode! Old Demon Blood Shadow exclaimed. Ling Han felt a jolt in his heart, and his entire person was assaulted with indescribable agony. Kakaka, did you think that the black murderous curse would only activate once a year? Old Demon Blood Shadow scoffed. Since I was the one who planted this black murderous curse, then as long as I will it, it can activate at any time. Now kneel in front of me. The old bastard was very proud of himself when he suddenly revealed an expression of disbelief. Ha! That was because Ling Han was standing completely unperturbed, and did not show any pained expression. Furthermore, not one of the blood shadow insects managed to penetrate the latter's skin, as if that was not a human standing there, but rather a slab of divine metal. Impossible! Why, you. Only now did old demon Blood Shadow feel his heart and spirit tremble. Firstly, he did not dare believe this, and secondly, he would not be able to capture Ling Han like this, and that would mean that he was not far from death. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, I have already experienced the black murderous curse several hundred times, and have long become capable of enduring it. Freak. Old demon Blood Shadow completely could not believe this. Just how overwhelming and agonizing was the black murderous curse. This was not a technique that he had created, but had rather been gained from an ancient cave. It was highly possible that it had been created by a celestial king. He had used it before on a great many people who had declared that their willpower was as strong as steel, but it would be 3 times at most, and each one of them would be wailing for mercy, and he could command them to do whatever he wished. For example, there was a person who supposedly loved his wife madly, and when he could no longer endure the black murderous curse, he still killed his beloved wife. There was an immortal palace tier elite who was chaste and pure, and after she had been planted with the black murderous curse, she suppressed the humiliation and entered into a brothel, where lowly cultivators played with her to their heart's content. This caused old demon Blood Shadow to be filled with confidence in the black murderous curse. There was no one that could withstand the agony that came after the curse activated. Chapter 1933. Shamelessness that knows no bounds. But in Ling Han's case, he had endured several hundred times of the curse activating. It should be known that only 4 to 5 years had passed, and the black murderous curse should only have activated 4 to 5 times. So how could there be as many as several hundred times? There was only one possibility. Ling Han had entered into the time cultivation chamber, and thus, while only 4 to 5 years had passed in the normal time flow, he had gone through as many as a few hundred years. Was there any other person like that? The black murderous curse was clearly so agonizing, capable of making a person whose willpower was strong as steel become obedient. And this was also the reason why old demon Blood Shadow had allowed Ling Han to go to Alchemy City without any worry. He was sure that Ling Han would definitely obediently do as he commanded. Who would have thought that this freak actually thought that the activation of the black murderous curse was too infrequent, and actually took his own initiative to enter into the time cultivation chamber to suffer? Old demon Blood Shadow was dumbfounded. He had never met anyone like Ling Han before. Was this human? This was practically divine metal that had taken human form. Just die then. Madness streaked through old demon Blood Shadow's eyes. Since he could not capture Ling Han, and was destined to die, then he might as well kill Ling Han so at least there would be some company for him in death. Die! He stretched open his right hand, as if he was pulling on invisible strings. He activated the black murderous curse to the fullest, planning to kill Ling Han. However, after the word die, there was only the soft whistle of the wind. Ling Han was still standing, completely unperturbed. Guys, how is this possible? The fact that Ling Han could withstand the pain that came from the activation of the black murderous curse only meant that he had a frightening willpower. But old demon Blood Shadow was presently launching a fatal attack from the black murderous curse. This had nothing to do with willpower, and would directly kill his victim. Why are you not dead? Ling Han broke into a grin, and raised his right foot. He took a step forwards, and as his foot landed, a large mass of blood shadow insects was shaken off from his body. Before they even landed on the ground, they had turned back to regulations and dispersed. They were not solid creatures, but rather formed from the divided soul of old demon Blood Shadow gathering the regulations of heaven and earth. Old bastard, don't forget. You are more or less at soul level by now, so how much power would you be able to draw from the black murderous curse? Ling Han asked calmly. His physique was extremely tough, so how could a soul level attack be capable of killing him? Old demon Blood Shadow was completely tongue-tied, unable to speak. Don't say it like it's so easy. Even if you are a 5th severance, which is comparable to Yang's soul, you are still a minor level inferior to me. Furthermore, the black murderous curse is already planted, and would directly activate within your body. Even if our cultivation levels were equal, you would still be easily killed. What more when my cultivation level is completely superior to yours? Just what kind of freak had he trifled with? The old bastard was presently filled with regret. Initially, there was still more than 100 million years to his lifespan, but now? First, his life force was seriously wounded, and then he went into battle by burning the remnants of his life force, which was courting his own death. If the heavens gave him another chance, he would definitely stay far away from Ling Han. No, he would directly kill this guy, and take the treasure he had by force. Old Demon Blood Shadow was increasingly sure that Ling Han had to have an astonishing treasure on him. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so strong? Even when things have come so far, you still haven't given up on your evil intentions. Ling Han humphed coldly as he strode forwards. Masses of blood shadow insects dropped, and his whole person was soon completely revealed, standing erect as a spear. I will send you on your way to the afterlife. Ling Han gave a battle cry. The 9 heavens flame flared, and he turned into a god of fire, blasting out towards Old Demon Blood Shadow. King Tears were invincible within their cultivation level, and Emperor Tears could still be invincible even with a gap of a single cultivation level. Then, what about Monarch Tears? Invincible even with a gap of 2 levels. The 5th Severance could be considered as Yang Soul in a different sense, but it still ultimately was not Yang Soul. Hence, there would definitely be some influence on Ling Han's tier-surpassing battle prowess. Thus, against a dividing soul tier, he was still unable to maintain invincibility with the gaps of 2 minor levels, but surpassing 1 level was easily done. What more when Old Demon Blood Shadow was at the end of his rope? With him putting his full effort in now, Old Demon Blood Shadow immediately fell into a disadvantage. Don't kill me! Old Demon Blood Shadow wailed. I don't have that many years to live. Spare my life so I can handle my posthumous matters. Ling Han only felt that this was outrageous. Just how shameless was this old bastard? To even say such words, his shamelessness really knew no bounds. But upon further thought, this old bastard had ambushed Ling Han, and planted a curse on him so he could steal the natural peach seal for him, which was already enough proof of his utter shamelessness. You had best go on your way to the afterlife sooner so that you won't harm others. Ling Han was completely merciless, every strike fatal. Ah! I'll kill you! Old Demon Blood Shadow burst the last bit of his life force, but even so, he was no match for Ling Han, and was still pummeled by him. Furthermore, his life force was already pitifully little in the first place, and now throwing everything onto the line like this was only temporary, and very soon, it was completely expended. I resent this. Hate. Hate. The old bastard, too, knew he was soon done for, and roared at the skies. He simply gave up any form of resistance now. You call yourself a prodigy of your generation, so how could you bring yourself to make a move on one who won't fight back? Fuck! Initially, Ling Han had thought that he already knew that this old bastard's shamelessness was completely without bounds, but he had never thought that he could surpass his imagination. Because he was no match for Ling Han, he actually dared to say indignantly that he was not even fighting back. How could he be so shameless to make such a declaration? Ling Han didn't even bother to say anything in denial anymore, and simply shot out a punch. The earlier you fuck die, the sooner this can be over with. But while Old Demon Blood Shadow said he was not fighting back, when he saw a punch flying towards him, he still stepped back and stretched out his arms to parry. This. To say nothing of the fact that Ling Han was speechless. Even Yen Xianlu and the others did not know what else to say. This old bastard had once been an ascending origin tier elite, so how could he be so shameless? He was so shameless that it was world-shaking. Disgusting! Ling Han's fiery punches landed repeatedly, and after over a dozen punches, Old Demon Blood Shadow was forcibly blasted into dust. Old Demon Blood Shadow's lingering spirit had not dispersed, and was still floating in the skies. It was filled with yearning for life, but because the spirit had no base, it soon dispersed without a trace, and was completely erased from this world. Ling Han, let's go play. Huanian ran over, hanging onto one of Ling Han's arms, her face bearing a dazzling smile. The Empress also walked over, and held Ling Han's other arm to show her sovereignty. Facing other women, the Empress had always been calm, but Huanian did indeed make her feel pressured. You witch, let go of Nyo's Ling Han. Huanian declared in jealousy. The Empress merely swept a disdainful eye over her, and ignored her. She had no interest in arguing with this kind of little girl. Wayaya, Nyo is going to die of fury. Huanian flew into a thunderous rage, her eyes shining with ferocity, blazing with killing intent. Ling Han could only step in as mediator, and pacified Huanian. Brother Ling, looks like you are going to be very busy. Then, I will just keep it short. There is about 10 years' time until the mystery realm opens, so you can make some preparations. If you could reach the peak stage of the 5th severance before that would be best, Yan Xianlu said. He then added, never underestimate the prodigies of wide prosperity heaven. Only if you have reached the peak stage of 5th severance could you possibly match them. Previously, he had exchanged 10 strikes with Ling Han, and he surmised that he had the upper hand. But even he was no match for Xueqi, so Ling Han naturally was even less likely to be a match. Ling Han only nodded, and did not say that his true strength lay in his physique. Furthermore, he had not used the 2 source powers of 9 Heavens Flame and Xueqi Source Water, either, and also had the Black Tower, which made up 3 types of supreme level regulations. The other had spoken true. He did indeed need to reach the peak stage of 5th severance as soon as possible. If he could avoid using external help, then it was best for him not to. Then we will meet again at the 3 Blooms Valley. Chapter 1934. Third Senior Brother. Ling Han left with the Empress and Huanian in tow. Meanwhile, Lu Herong could not bear how Huanian kept clinging to Ling Han, and decisively hid in the shadows. Without seeing or hearing them, she wouldn't feel annoyed. However, the moment Huanian encountered danger, she would definitely appear at the first moment. "Oh, that's right." Ling Han clapped a hand on his forehead. With a wave of his right hand, Bewitching Maiden Ro was thrown out of his spatial god tool. Though this bewitching maiden could indeed exit on her own, she did not know the situation outside. If they were still on Three Yong Peak, it was possible that she would die immediately as soon as she came out. Bewitching Maiden Ro was stunned for a moment, and then looked strangely at Ling Han. This guy actually gave her such a precious treasure, without a single prior condition. In fact, he did not even ask her to thank him. This actually made her feel very touched. After so many days, she had naturally refined the heavenly Tao Jade fully, compensating for the shortcomings in her cultivation. Striking herself had become delivering strikes at the heaven and earth, and she had become an emperor tier, and a top-tier emperor tier at that. But she immediately showed an expression of astonishment because she had spotted Huanian. There was actually an exquisite beauty that could match the Empress in this world. Meanwhile, Huanian's jealousy soured. She glared fiercely at Bewitching Maiden Ro, and exclaimed, "Ling Han, you're so mean. It's not enough that you have such a witch, you have a vixen too." Ling Han chuckled and said, "Don't be willful. This is just a friend." Bewitching Maiden Ro showed a meaningful smile, and said, "Oh, just a friend?" This smile was enchantingly beautiful. "Vixen, if you dare to smile again, Nyo will chop off your vixen head." Huanian threatened angrily. "Young Master Ling, she's so fierce," Bewitching Maiden Ro said, and deliberately hid behind Ling Han, looking delicate and fragile. "Damn you! Damn you!" Huanian yelled in fury, her viciousness on full display. "Don't tease her, or you'll get yourself killed," the Empress said. Even she did not have the confidence to defeat Huanian. What more a weaker opponent like Bewitching Maiden Ro? The reason why she had said this was because Huanian really would commit murder, and she did not want Ling Han to lose an excellent aid for his cultivation. Bewitching Maiden Ro also felt slight regret. That look from Huanian, that expression definitely showed that she was extremely ferocious, and it was not just merely joking around. But she was also slightly defiant. Aside from not having advanced into the 5th severance, Bewitching Maiden Ro was definitely a top-grade existence in the severing mundane tier. Why did she have to be afraid of Huanian? She can suppress you with a single finger. Ling Han nodded. Huanian is a 5th severance, and maybe slightly stronger than even me. After all, he had just advanced into the 5th severance, while Huanian was already at the 5th severance's peak stage. The 5th severance. Instantly, Bewitching Maiden Ro could only yield. Her cultivation was focused on charm technique, and charm techniques did not only seduce men. She had a glib tongue, and chose the words that Huanian liked to hear, such as how much Ling Han liked her, how he had missed her very much, and so on. Immediately, the little girl bared her mouth in a cheerful grin. "Vixen, don't think that Nyo doesn't know you are just sucking up. But seeing as you're not too bad, Nyo will spare you just this once," Huanian declared casually. She was not the slightest bit dumb. Ling Han released the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, which naturally caused Huanian to once more have a bout of jealousy. Only after Ling Han had picked her up and comforted for a good while was her anger appeased. After all, they had been apart too long, and she had missed him dearly. Meanwhile, the two children made Huanian laugh loudly, and exclaim that they were interesting. They returned to Alchemy City. With the Dragon Hawk as their mode of transport, their speed naturally increased greatly. They had reached Alchemy City in just over a month's time. Ling Han went to meet Grandmaster Xueqi and explained the situation in simple words. Then, he went into seclusion again. There were too many things that he had to do. First, he had to increase his abilities in alchemy and advance to 3 stars as soon as possible. Secondly, he also had to cultivate and reach the peak stage of the 5th severance. After the journey to the mystery realm, he was going to break through to the dividing soul tier. In the celestial realm, one would have to travel to a specific location to advance to the next major tier, and in the case of the dividing soul tier, he would have to go to different places to break through to all 4 of the minor levels, unlike the severing mundane tier, where he only had to do so for the first severance and not for the other severances. Similar to the severing mundane tier, there were very many places where one could break through to the dividing soul tier, and breaking through at different places would also have a great influence on one's future battle prowess. Hence, he definitely had to choose the best location for his breakthrough. Ling Han had already begun to study this problem. With the Black Tower, and with the help of the reincarnation tree, this day should not be too far away. The Empress and Huanian would occasionally glare at each other, both wanting to suppress the other, especially in Huanian's case. She had repeatedly wanted to secretly make a move and kill off the Empress. Thankfully, Ling Han managed to stop her all these times. The two women had fought a battle, and it was natural that it was Huanian that had won. Furthermore, her advantage was extremely great. Firstly, it was because the Empress had just advanced into 5th severance, and secondly, Huanian was indeed superior in terms of celestial technique, physique, and natural talent in cultivation. It was not unjust that the Empress had lost. However, after this battle, the animosity between the two women had instead dispersed. Though they could not be considered great friends, they had reached a certain tacit agreement, and no longer glared at each other day and night. Ling Han was relieved, and focused on alchemy and advancing to the peak stage of the 5th severance. Inside the Black Tower, he had another 3 supreme regulations, but what was unfortunate was that Ling Han was the only one who could comprehend them, and others could not benefit from them, which caused Ling Han to feel slight disappointment. However, the Black Tower also had the power of time now, and the acceleration rate of 1,000 times was extremely astonishing. Though there were 10 years, taking into consideration issues like travel time, they still had to set out ahead of time. Hence, it would more or less be around 9 years. 9 years would mean close to 330,000 years worth of time to comprehend Tao, and the acceleration of time would mean close to 9,000 years, which was an extremely extensive period of time. Bewitching Maiden Row was also considered to have passed the test, so Ling Han tossed her into the Black Tower as well. To friends, Ling Han had never been petty. Surprisingly, Lu Herong did not step out to stop them, and would only occasionally appear in Ling Han's residence, looking at where the Black Tower was while thinking pensively. After 7 years in real time, Ling Han had still not advanced to become a 3-star alchemist, but in terms of spirit refinement, he had had a breakthrough, and had advanced to the level of 3rd refinement. Whether it was cultivation or alchemy, advancing a step further would be increasingly harder and harder the further one went. Ling Han could not help but admit that 3-star alchemists were still very valuable. It was no wonder that 4th refinement was the lifetime limit for the majority of alchemists. It was very difficult for him to improve, even when he had spent so much time on this. However, if other alchemists were to know that he was complaining like this, they would definitely fly into fury. You only took hundreds of thousands of years, and you actually dared to complain? Then how were the majority of alchemists supposed to endure this? 9 years later, Ling Han and his group exited the Black Tower. There would of course not be much change in the appearance of a celestial, and the changes in Shirley and Yu were more obvious. They had grown to look like youths in their teens. They had not used any time acceleration effects, or they would have long since become adults. Ling Han did not want them to miss out on their youth. At least, they should enter their 20th year under the normal time flow. Only 9 years had passed in the outside world. It was natural that there was not much change in Alchemy City, and those previous holy sons and holy daughters had all kept a low profile. With Grandmaster Xueqi watching over things, who would dare cause trouble? Ling Han prepared to set out, but before he managed to depart, he was summoned by Grandmaster Xueqi first. "Come, let me introduce someone. This is your nephew," Grandmaster Xueqi said smilingly, pointing at a middle-aged man ahead. "Peng Huanian, third's disciple, and he's already a 3-star alchemist." Chapter 1935. Contempt. Alchemist Xueqi had a total of 3 disciples. Ex-disciples. Because they were too seriously influenced by him, if they continued to stay by his side, it would forever be impossible for them to surpass him. Thus, Alchemist Xueqi had long since discharged these 3 disciples. Not that he held no affection for them, but rather he hoped they could have brighter futures. His 3rd disciple was named Zhu Feng, and had long since become a 4-star alchemist. However, in terms of spirit refinement, he had attained 5th refinement, so he could barely be considered a grandmaster, but there was still a very far distance between him and alchemist Xueqi. Peng Huanian glanced at Ling, a sliver of disdain appearing in his eyes. A mere 2-star alchemist, what right did he have to be called uncle by him? That was really too much of a joke. However, with Grandmaster Xueqi in front of him, he did not dare be insolent. After all, this was the strongest alchemist in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm, and there was none that could compare. Even the 2 alchemists, Heavenly Heart and Xueqi, were inferior to him, and those 2 alchemists had attained 6th refinement. Hence, Peng Huanian could only reluctantly say, "Greetings, 4th uncle." If it was not for the fact that Zhu Feng thought extremely highly of Grandmaster Xueqi, and was filled with incredible respect for him, he would really want to turn around and leave. As a noble 3-star alchemist, he was compelled to actually address a 2-star alchemist as uncle. He could not bear the embarrassment. He was slightly confused. It was clear that Zhu Feng was already a 4-star alchemist, and had now even advanced to the level of 6th refinement. Furthermore, he was a disciple that Grandmaster Xueqi had discharged, so why was he still filled with such reverence towards Grandmaster Xueqi, and had deliberately urged him to observe the etiquette as befitting of a grand disciple? Ling saw this but merely smiled and said, "Nephew Peng." When the word nephew entered his ears, Peng Huanian naturally was even more displeased, his expression dark. Grandmaster Xueqi smiled, and said to Ling, "Third has finally broken through, advancing from 5th refinement to 6th refinement. Huanian has deliberately come to inform me. And you go on my behalf. You apprentice brothers should meet each other." "Understood," Ling said solemnly. Peng Huanian could not help himself, and interrupted, "Isn't 4th uncle a little too young? Can he bear such a heavy responsibility?" Grandmaster Xueqi was immediately displeased. Firstly, this was his arrangement, and secondly, Ling was his beloved youngest disciple. What right do you have to express doubt? Who do you think you are? Do you have any idea what it means to respect your seniors? However, ultimately, he had indeed discharged Zhu Feng, and only in name was he still Peng Huanian's grandmaster, so it would not be appropriate to be too strict. Thus, he only glared at Peng Huanian, a very imposing air exuding from him. Peng Huanian's heart immediately jolted, a sense of indescribable coldness welling up in his heart. To say nothing of the fact that Grandmaster Xueqi was a king tier among 4-star alchemists, who no one in the Eastern Celestial Realm could compare to, and had an extremely high position, just the fact that he was an ascending origin tier elite meant the might of that glare was nothing that a mere dividing soul tier could bear. He lowered his head, and felt like his whole body was shivering. His discomfort could not be described, and he almost fell onto his knees in a moment of weakness. "Go and pack up a bit," Grandmaster Xueqi said smilingly to Ling. He was indescribably fond of this youngest disciple, and the fact that he had Ling represent him to congratulate Zhu Feng on advancing into 6th refinement was also a kind of announcement that Ling was his heir, and could represent him in all respects. Ling nodded and asked Peng Huanian, "When do we set out?" "The distance of this journey is not short, so it is best to set out in the next few days." Grandmaster Xueqi interrupted, "Help me pass this vial of abundant origin pills to 3rd. It would be my celebratory gift to him." He took out an alchemy vial, which he handed over to Ling. Ling nodded, took the vial, and stowed it away. Peng Huanian involuntarily showed an expression of envy. Abundant origin pill was the highest grade among 4-star alchemical pills. If an ascending origin tier took it, it could increase their source power. It was an incredibly precious alchemical pill, and even one was exorbitantly valuable. I will make some preparations, and we can set out tomorrow, Ling Han said to Peng Huanian. He was not asking for the other's opinion, but merely informing him. He was the uncle here, so he naturally could directly decide this kind of issue. There was no need for him to discuss with the other party. Peng Huanian's displeased expression became even more pronounced, but because Grandmaster Zicheng was still here, he did not dare say a word. Mentally, he swore that after they set out, he would definitely deal with this uncle, and curb his spirit. Otherwise, wouldn't this brat become tyrannical when they reached Guanhua City? Ling Han saw this, but only smiled faintly, and did not take it to heart. The two of them took their leave from Grandmaster Zicheng, and then left. When Ling Han told this to the Empress, Huanian, and the others, everyone agreed in unison that they were to go together to offer congratulations to Grandmaster Zhu Feng. Thankfully, Guanhua City is not too far from the Three Blooms Mountain Pass where we agreed to meet Yan Xianlu. It's just about a month or so away, and we can completely make it in time. After Ling Han did some calculation, he nodded. He could make it to both locations very easily. Godfather, we want to go too, Xueqi and his sister exclaimed. Actually, it was unknown which of the two of them was older. Thus, the two of them had always argued with flushed faces, and had even come to blows over the issue of who was older. For the time being, Xueqi was slightly at an advantage. All right, we will go together, Ling Han said with a smile. In the end, he had not taken these two kids as his disciples, but had rather adopted them as his godchildren, and was also nurturing these two kids with great care as well. Though only a dozen or so years had passed, this pair of siblings had already advanced into the heavenly body tier. This was firstly because the resources in the celestial realm were too abundant, and secondly, they had the reincarnation tree, which was endlessly shortening the time they spent on comprehension. Additionally, the physique of this pair of siblings was too good, containing a sliver of source power of heaven and earth, so when they cultivated, it would be half the work with twice the effect. After a day of preparations, they set out on their journey, heading towards Guanhua City. This time, they did not ride the Dragon Hawk, but rather went on the water route. They had a water shuttle as their means of transport. It was not too big, only 15 meters long and 3 meters wide. It had been fortified by certain formations, so its speed was astonishingly rapid. However, the moment they boarded the water shuttle, Peng Huanian immediately switched to a different expression, appearing to be incredibly proud. There were a total of 3 rooms on the vessel. After he had taken the largest one for himself, he did not bother with Ling Han and his group any further. The water shuttle could steer itself, and had no need of manual control, or someone to keep an eye on it. Ling Han, Nyo will go and beat him up, Huanian said in displeasure. Forget it. For the sake of third senior brother, there is no need for us to drop to his level, Ling Han said. After all, Ling Han was the senior here, and he had not even seen his third senior brother yet, so if he did beat up the latter's disciple, it would not be too appropriate. Huanian pouted, her eyes looking from side to side. Clearly, there was no way she was going to give up the matter just like that. The journey was quiet, and after about 3 months, they had exited the calm peace heaven, and entered into the wide prosperity heaven. After entering into the wide prosperity heaven, and traveling for about half a month's time, they finally arrived at Guanhua City. This was a celestial king tier city. The master of Guanhua City was Universal Cloud's celestial king, who had already attained 4th heaven in the celestial king tier. Guanhua City was the main base of the Universal Cloud sect that the Universal Cloud celestial king had established. The area under the reign of the Universal Cloud sect comprised as many as tens of thousands of cities, and the size of their territory was astonishingly huge. After the group disembarked from the water shuttle, they entered into Guanhua City. Alchemist Peng. When they saw Peng Huanian, the guards at the city gates all approached, ingratiating expressions on their faces. Alchemists truly had such outstanding status. Peng Huanian showed an expression of arrogance, and deliberately glanced at Ling Han, his intention of showing his authority incredibly clear. See, this is how a 3-star alchemist is treated, and that is how awesome I am. Are you worthy of my calling you uncle? Are you worthy? Chapter 1936. Used like a tool. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he said, Peng Huanian, for the sake of third senior brother, I will not call you to account, but you should know your own measure. Do not seek your own humiliation. Ha ha! Peng Huanian sneered. Ling Han, do you think that just because you are under the tutelage of Grandmaster Xueqi, you have the right to rule over me? I have already tolerated you for a very long time. You are but a brat, so what are you strutting around for? He was jealous of Ling Han. The latter was superior to him in nothing, yet was taken in by alchemist Xueqi as disciple, and a disciple that was considered the heir of his teachings at that. Moreover, this brat had 4 beauties by his side, and all of them were supremely beautiful, each having her own unique traits. In terms of cultivation strength, he was a dividing soul tier. In terms of alchemy, he was a 3-star alchemist. Just how was he inferior to Ling Han? He was defiant. What gave Ling Han the right to have all this? Ling Han, Niu wants to pummel him. Niu was the first to lose composure, and was about to step forwards and launch herself into a fight. Meanwhile, the Empress's expression was icy and cold. She similarly could not bear having others be rude towards Ling Han, which made her feel as if it had happened to her. Peng Huanian was completely unafraid. These people were all severing mundane tiers, while he was a young soul elite. How could it be that all of them were heaven-defying freakish 5th severance, and could match him in battle? Wasn't that a joke? Grandmaster. Right at this moment, a young man walked quickly out of the city. He was dressed entirely in embroidered robes of crimson, and was incredibly showy. His looks were not too bad, and with a lanky build, he could definitely be considered a handsome young man. When they saw this young man, the guards hurriedly paid their respects. This man was no simple character. Not only was he Peng Huanian's grand disciple, he was also the young master of the noble Missouri clan of the city, and belonged to the category of characters that could make the earth quake with just a stomp of their foot. His name was Mo Shuang. Mo Shuang. Peng Huanian nodded with a smile, seeming to treat this grand disciple with important regard. That was natural. The Mo clan was an ascending origin tier force, and could be considered the strongest below Celestial King tier. He was only a 3-star alchemist, and in front of the Mo clan, he could only claim to have some status, but he still was not worthy enough of putting on airs. Alchemists indeed had outstanding status, but this status was bestowed on them by cultivators. In front of true mighty figures, what difference did an alchemist have with a stranger? For example, Mo clan was a target that Peng Huanian had to curry favor with. Mo Shuang's expression was respectful, but there was a sliver of pride in his eyes. Though he had been taken in under Grandmaster Zhu Feng, his true strength lay in cultivation. As for alchemy, it was just a hobby for him. Furthermore, Guanhua City had this kind of atmosphere. Prodigies of cultivation would get a little involved in alchemy so that they could add further shine to their reputation. Grandmaster, this is... He looked at Ling Han, exuding a little puzzlement, but more of contempt. Oh, this is just a minor character that has come to congratulate your founder on having broken through to 6th refinement, Peng Huanian stated evenly. With an outsider present, it was absolutely impossible for him to call Ling Han uncle. From the calm peace heaven, he added further. The calm peace heaven. The sneer on Mo Shuang's face became even more pronounced. Who did not know that the calm peace heaven was the weakest in strength among the 33 heavens of Eastern Celestial Realm? Previously, it had been ranked as equals with the wide prosperity heaven and far west heaven, but in the last several 100 million years, the cultivation level of the wide prosperity heaven and far west heaven had taken leaps and bounds in development, and had already left the calm peace heaven far behind. In the hearts of the cultivators of the wide prosperity heaven, the calm peace heaven was a symbol of weakness. Thus, if the cultivation level of both sides was equal, it was natural that it would be the cultivator from the wide prosperity heaven that could emerge victorious more easily. However, while the calm peace heaven was weak, it did seem to be rich in exquisite beauties. He glanced at Huanian, then looked at the Empress, and then passed an eye over bewitching Maiden Row. The 3 women all had their own unique traits. One was beautiful yet pure, one was supremely elegant, though she did not show her appearance, and the last was alluring and bewitching, every slight movement capable of enchanting others. Grandmaster, it seems like this person has disrespected you, Mo Shuang said. He was secretly glad. This was a rare opportunity for him to show his might. He could humiliate Ling Han in public, and see what these beautiful women would think of him then. The calm peace heaven was really weak. 3 top-grade beauties were actually following such a wimp. Peng Huanian calmly stated. He is just a young man that has an exaggerated opinion of his own abilities. In front of this junior, he naturally had to maintain the reservedness that he had as a high-grade alchemist. However, firstly, he was indeed conducting himself with dignity, and secondly, Ling Han was indeed Grandmaster Zi Cheng's disciple, and was his martial uncle as well. If he made a move on Ling Han personally, Grandmaster Zhu Feng would definitely not spare him. But Mo Shuang was a different case. Firstly, he could not be held responsible, since he did not know better, and secondly, the Mo clan was a powerful force. How could it be that Zhu Feng would turn hostile with the Mo clan? Thus, if Mo Shuang were to pummel Ling Han, it was definite that Ling Han could only suffer in silence. When Mo Shuang heard this, he instantly came to a decision. Peng Huanian disliked Ling Han very much, but because of his self-conduct, it would not be proper for him to make a move. Thus, he was only saying some words in contempt, but was secretly encouraging him to make a move. Precisely what he wanted. Brat, you had better kneel and apologize to my grandmaster. Mo Shuang pointed a finger at Ling Han, his tone filled with the command of one who was used to a high position. He really looked down with too much contempt on those who came from the calm peace heaven. He heard that there were only 2 or 3 monarch tiers even, unlike in their wide prosperity heaven, where there was one such ultimate monarch tier even in this Guanhua city. He was Liu Jie, a man of outstanding talent. Ling Han waved a hand, indicating for the Empress and the others not to be excited. He would deal with this matter. He looked smilingly at Mo Shuang, and said, Kid, hasn't anyone taught you before that you should not be used by others like a tool? Kid, do you think you are my senior? Instantly, Mo Shuang was fuming with rage, and looking at Ling Han's vitality and flame of life, they all showed that the latter was younger than him, and very much younger at that, but this guy actually dared to call him kid. Fuck. What a bad mouth. Let me first deal with your smelly mouth. Mo Shuang made a brazen move. His strength was indeed extraordinary. As the young master of an ascending origin tier clan, he was worthy of being ranked among emperor tiers. Ling Han nodded internally. No wonder it was said that the wide prosperity heaven had been boosted in fortune by the heaven and earth. Any random severing mundane tier he met was actually an emperor tier, and from this it could be seen just how high the overall level of cultivation was in the wide prosperity heaven. However, what could a mere 4th severance do in front of him? Ling Han crossed his arms behind him as his feet stepped casually, easily dodging Mo Shuang's attack. Seeing that they shared the same roots, and he was a senior, Ling Han decided that he would not defeat the other two badly. Moreover, Mo Shuang was young and impetuous, and was only being used like a tool by Peng Huanian. Boom, boom, boom. Mo Shuang delivered over a dozen consecutive moves, yet did not even manage to touch a corner of Ling Han's robes. Involuntarily, his face flushed red, and his eyes burned with endless fury. He had thought that he would be able to suppress Ling Han with a single move, so that the latter would be embarrassed. Then, the Empress and the other beauties would be able to see who was better and who was worse just by comparing them. However, after these few moves, all his effort came to nothing. Ling Han, on the other hand, was still elegant, graceful, and incredibly relaxed. With this comparison, it was clear that Ling Han was stronger. He felt embarrassed, and then a blazing fury rose up in him. Mo 7th, met your match? Amidst a long bout of laughter, a group of 7 walked out of the city. They consisted of 5 men and 2 women, and they were all giants among men. The men looked handsome and heroic, while the women were beautiful and sweet. The speaker was a man whose back bore a giant purple bow that was slightly taller than even his person. He strode forwards, exuding a captivating heroism. Chapter 1937. Who exactly are you? Mo Shuang immediately withdrew. He took a few steps back, drawing out the distance between himself and Ling Han. Only then did he turn towards the group of 7, showing an expression of humiliation and anger, and declared, Han Tao, there is no need for you to poke your nose in. He was talking to the man that was shouldering a large bough. Han Tao laughed loudly. As his eyes swept over Ling Han's group, a stunned expression immediately appeared on his face. The beauty of the Empress, Huanian, and bewitching Maiden Ro could be considered without match in this world, yet 3 of them just happened to appear at the same time. Though the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was slightly inferior, she could still be considered an exquisite beauty, and even in Guanhua City, there were not many who could compare to her. Don't you, 7th young Master Mo, consider yourself important, and think that you are the most powerful prodigy beside Holy Sun Lu? Why have you been fighting for so long, and still couldn't even touch a corner of your opponent's robes? A youth in green asked with a laugh, the hint of ridicule about the corners of his lips extremely apparent. His name was Liu Haoming, and he could be considered a foe of Mo Shuang. That was because both of them were courting the same woman, and that was the young girl in red who was also a member of this group of 7. She was called Fairy Du, and her name was Du Xiuyun. With such a good opportunity in front of him, there was naturally no reason for him to miss out on it. Liu Haoming, do you want to die? Mo Shuang's temper was flaring, and hearing the mocking ridicule from Liu Haoming, he couldn't help but become even more displeased. Oh, if you have not reached the 7th level in your Heaven Peck technique, you are completely unworthy to become my opponent, Liu Haoming declared proudly. Mo Shuang's gaze became serious. You have reached breakthrough in your Great Evolution technique? Hee. Liu Haoming appeared to be even more arrogant. In truth, he had finally pushed the Great Evolution technique to the level of breakthrough just a few days ago, but seeking out Mo Shuang directly for a challenge would seem too deliberate, and this presently was the best chance for him. To harshly humiliate Mo Shuang in front of Du Xiuyun. Mo Shuang wanted to say some fierce words, but after being hostile with Liu Haoming for so long, the two of them could be considered very knowledgeable about each other. Only if his Heaven Peck technique had reached the 7th level would he be capable of matching the other's breakthrough. If he went off to battle the other just for the sake of his pride, it was certain that he would be embarrassed, and the humiliation of that far surpassed that of refusing to battle. Now that Liu Haoming had the upper hand, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. He said, Brother Mo, let me help you deal with this opponent. This could be considered further humiliation. Since you couldn't handle him, and I can, it naturally means that you are inferior. Ling Han was just watching the proceedings when he suddenly saw that he was pulled abruptly into the fray. He was going to turn from a spectator to one of the leads, which made him slightly surprised. Just now, he hadn't said anything, right? Husband indeed is the type to attract trouble. No matter what, you would still attract animosity, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said with a tone of certainty. Ling Han beat them up. Meanwhile, Huanian called out in excitement. Ling Han stroked his chin and asked, What did I do to you? Did I accidentally leak out how you come and go from the brothel, or was it the matter of your fondness for men? Judging from the look of things, this battle would be inevitable, and he did not bother to advise the other party to stop before he sought his own suffering. Since he was so determined to ask for a beating, what could be done? Han Tao and the others immediately burst into laughter. The two women covered their mouths, appearing to be embarrassed, but judging from their eyes, it was clear that this kind of joke was completely incapable of causing them to be embarrassed. Liu Haoming meanwhile was furious. He looked at Ling Han menacingly, and said, At first, I had only planned to play around with you, but you just had to blurt out nonsense. Looks like if I don't give you a beating, you won't learn to become obedient. Ling Han shook his head and replied, I don't want to play with you, you pervert that likes men. Liu Haoming was so furious that his hands were shaking. How could this guy have such a venomous tongue? You just have to ask for your own suffering. He moved and boom, a rainbow surged out of his body, turning into a massive scythe that sliced out towards Ling Han. There were 7 seals of great Tao flickering on the blade, and they were all incredibly mysterious. Abruptly, Mo Shuang's expression became grim. 7 seals of great Tao were the symbol of someone who had reached breakthrough in the Great Evolution technique. Though those 7 seals were not complete, their number was still a solid threat. Among 4th Severance Emperor tiers, this could already be ranked into the top tier, and further upwards. Only Monarch tiers could suppress him. He had to work hard and put more effort in, or he would really be stepped on by Liu Haoming. Ling Han extended a finger, tapping out towards Liu Haoming. Facing Mo Shuang, for the sake of his 3rd senior brother, Ling Han had been easy on him. After all, he was a senior. But against Liu Haoming, there was no need for that. He just had to move directly. Wang, he flicked out a finger, and a frightening aura immediately pressed down like the heavens crashing down. Everything else had disappeared, and the only thing left was that finger of Ling Han that was streaking through the air in attack. It was clearly just in front of his eyes, yet exuded a pressure that seemed to traverse all ages. Ling Han had embedded a sliver of the regulations of time in this tap. It was not tide of the ages, but what he had comprehended from the Black Tower. Immediately, Lu Haoming's expression changed greatly. Though they had not actually clashed yet, he had a feeling that this tap was something he could not take head-on. How could that be? The other was only a fourth severance too. Pooh! He felt a suffocating feeling in his heart, and spluttered out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this scene, everyone could feel their heads go numb with shock. It should be known that Ling Han's attack had not even made contact yet. It had just been the gust of wind that had come with the attack, and yet Lu Haoming already could not withstand it. The gap in power was really too wide. This was not a battle of fourth severance against fourth severance. It clearly was a dividing soul tear crushing a severing mundane tear. Lu Haoming collapsed onto the ground, and could only watch helplessly the incoming offensive of this tap. Boundless sweat surged all over his body, instantly dampening his clothing. However, this finger stopped right in front of Lu Haoming's forehead, and was just a slight bit away from making actual contact. Fifth severance. Mo Shuang and the others were all mouthing these words soundlessly, their faces covered with astonishment. Even in the wide prosperity heaven, there were pitifully few fifth severance monarch tiers. That really was the highest grade prodigy of the entire celestial realm, capable of garnering extreme envy from countless king tiers and emperor tiers. Ling Han smiled faintly and asked, "Is this fun?" Lu Haoming could not speak at all. He was already completely dumbfounded with shock. After a long while, he finally recovered some of his composure, and an involuntary hatred rose up in him against Ling Han. How could he not hate Ling Han? You were so strong, being completely capable of easily defeating Mo Shuang, so why had you put on a pretense of being more or less his equal, causing Lu Haoming to be fooled and underestimate his opponent? The latter made his move, and the result was that he had experienced a major embarrassment. Someone like Lu Haoming would definitely not do any kind of self-reflection. It was clearly he who had made the first move to provoke and attack Ling Han, but he actually thought that it was Ling Han who had deliberately pretended to be weak, tempting him to make a move. This really was the guilty party filing the suit. Mo Shuang was also stunned. He naturally knew Lu Haoming's strength very well, and the latter was actually no match for Ling Han at all. Then it had to be the same case for him too, but previously, Ling Han had actually gone easy on him for so many moves. Now that he thought about him, this was really giving him face. This was how humans were. Before finding out about Ling Han's true strength, Mo Shuang thought that Ling Han could be pushed around as he liked. But now that he had discovered how strong Ling Han was, he was instead grateful towards Ling Han. Who exactly was this? After he had dispensed with his arrogance, Mo Shuang immediately recovered the intelligence that was befitting of a prodigy. Though Peng Huanian was very contemptuous towards Ling Han, upon deeper thought, the former must have come with Ling Han. Someone who was worthy of being personally escorted by a 3-star alchemist. What did that mean? Ling Han definitely was not the person that Peng Huanian had vaguely described, just a nameless nobody from the calm peace heaven. On the other hand, he had to have come from a very prestigious background. Immediately, realization dawned on Mo Shuang. Peng Huanian had actually used him as a tool. Because he was not in the position to make a move on Ling Han, he had pushed him out, almost causing him to fall into a terrible defeat and resulting in humiliation. As he thought about it, he was filled with gratitude towards Ling Han, but felt a rising anger towards Peng Huanian. "Brother Ling, who exactly are you?" he asked. Chapter 1938. Youngest uncle is right. Me? Ling Han smiled slightly, and replied, "Haven't I said before? I am your senior." These words made Mo Shuang very displeased. He thought that he had already adjusted his attitude very well. "Why are you still toying around with me, and taking advantage of me?" "I didn't say anything wrong, did I?" "Nephew Peng," Ling Han asked with a smile, though his eyes were turned on Peng Huanian. "What?" Everyone looked at Peng Huanian in shock. These young emperor tiers indeed did not look too highly on the dividing soul tier. After all, they would very soon be capable of advancing into this level. What they were concerned about naturally was Peng Huanian's identity as a 3-star alchemist. Alchemists had outstanding status, and a 3-star alchemist could barely be considered equivalent to an ascending origin tier. Thus, Peng Huanian naturally was very awesome. If that hadn't been the case, how could Zi Cheng have sent him to invite Grandmaster Zi Cheng? But now, Ling Han actually addressed Peng Huanian as nephew. Nephew. This definitely could not be the hierarchy in terms of cultivation. That was because Peng Huanian was an alchemist, and cultivation was only his secondary field. He would not deliberately go and take a master in cultivation, and wouldn't have an overwhelmingly young uncle due to that. Alchemy. Everyone knew that Peng Huanian's master was Zhu Feng. If Peng Huanian really was Ling Han's nephew, then Ling Han would be the same generation as Zhu Feng. Hiss, was this even possible? All of a sudden, everyone's eyes were focused on Peng Huanian, wanting to see how he would answer. Peng Huanian couldn't help but feel incredibly awkward, a red flush rising up on his cheeks. Did he dare to speak a lie in full view of the public like this? If Zhu Feng were to find out, he would definitely kill him. You even wanted to refuse to recognize your own founder. He could sketch over Ling Han's identity, but if Ling Han really questioned him in public, what could he do? Denial was absolutely impossible, but if he deliberately changed the topic, who could not see through such an obvious deception? There was nothing else that could be done. Peng Huanian gritted his teeth and answered, "Youngest uncle is right." Boom! Everyone felt a mental jolt. Ling Han was really Peng Huanian's uncle. This intel was too explosive and astonishing. When they turned to look at Ling Han again, they instantly felt that Ling Han did not have the slightest bit of pointless arrogance. Since he could call himself a brother of a 4-star alchemist, it was certain that he would be incredibly proud. No. Ling Han's previous attitude could practically be considered extremely humble. It should be known that it was Mo Shuang and Lu Haoming who had done the provoking at first. Meanwhile, Mo Shuang was both grateful and furious. His gratitude was naturally directed at Ling Han. This was his great-granduncle. With his provocation, Ling Han did not get irritated or angry. In fact, Ling Han was also a 5th Severance Monarch tier, and was completely capable of defeating him in one move. Even if he had been beaten to severe injury, it was sure that Mo Clan would not have had the slightest temper. Who asked your junior to be impolite towards the junior brother of Grandmaster Zhu Feng first? If one really got down to it, even if he had been killed, he would have deserved it. He felt gratitude towards Ling Han, so what was left was naturally the fury he felt towards Peng Huanian. Old geezer, you clearly know who Ling Han is, and actually dare push me into a living hell? How could you do that? Lu Haoming also felt a jolt in his heart. He knew that he had met his match, but he could not bring himself to write off everything between him and Ling Han with one stroke like this. It was fine that he was no match for Ling Han. There were many such people in Guanhua City, and he only had to say a few words to incite disharmony. No one could humiliate him like this. Great-granduncle, let me take you around the city, Mo Shuang said immediately, not even casting a second look at Peng Huanian. In any case, he was just getting some additional limelight as an alchemist. In the future, it was absolutely impossible for him to focus solely on alchemy. Moreover, he might never be capable of advancing to become a 1-star alchemist in this lifetime, so what was the point of wasting his time on this field? Hence, the respect he felt towards Peng Huanian was only due to the latter's status as a 3-star alchemist, and not because he actually wanted to learn something from him. Being tricked by Peng Huanian like this, he was naturally angry. Ling Han glanced at Peng Huanian, and dismissed the idea of beating him up. He answered, "Sure, then we'll trouble a local like Yub. Don't worry, I will definitely satisfy you, great-granduncle," Mo Shuang said with a laugh. It was clear that he was deliberately currying favor with Ling Han. This was not just because he felt gratitude towards Ling Han, but also because Ling Han was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother. This connection was too astonishing. If the Grand Elder of the Mo clan was here, he would definitely agree to having him develop friendly relations with Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and said, "There is no need to call me a great-granduncle. You can just call me by name." He could tell that Mo Shuang was not a real alchemist. Actually, Mo Shuang did not want to call Ling Han with such a scary address, either. When he heard this, he was naturally greatly pleased, and answered, "Then I'll just call you Brother Ling." "Fine. Brother Ling, we will also walk around with you," Han Tao and the others all said. They were not idiots that could not tell that Ling Han was a rare commodity worth hoarding. How could they possibly allow Mo Shuang to claim all the benefits by himself? The whole group left with Ling Han in their center, leaving behind only Peng Huanian and Lu Haoming, whose expressions were so dark that water could drip. Humph! Peng Huanian left in a flutter of robes. The fists that were hidden in his sleeves were tightly gripped, his anger pushed to the pinnacle. A lowly character who was just from the calm peace heaven actually dared to embarrass him. It was absolutely impossible for him to spare Ling Han just like this. Just wait and see. This is Guanhua City. Now that you, someone who has completely zero foundations here, have come, it is destined that I will be able to play around with you as I please, Ling Han. There was still half a month until the celebrations, and he had more than enough time to play around with Ling Han before then. Seeing Peng Huanian leave, Lu Haoming also set off, heading in a different direction. It was naturally impossible for him to spare Ling Han. There was no need for him to ask others for help, as there were many dividing soul-tier elites in the Liu Clan itself. Even if you are a 5th Severance and a Monarch tier, you will only be able to match Yang Soul at most. I will ask a Yin Soul elite to help me, so how could that not be enough to suppress you? Just wait and see. In the company of Mo Shuang and the others, Ling Han toured around in Guanhua City. Unlike Alchemy City, there was only one floor in Guanhua City, but it was incredibly colossal. To say nothing of 10 days to half a month, it was not certain that one could more or less tour around the whole city even in 100 or 1,000 years. This city was comparable to a super-large planet where the territory was astonishingly huge, and the population numbered in hundreds of millions. Thus, Ling Han and their group could only have a fleeting glance of everything as they passed. Thankfully, there were transfer formations in the city itself. As long as one could pay enough starstones, you could tour around as much as you liked. After a whole day of touring around, Ling Han took up residence in the Mo Clan manor with Mo Clan's earnest invitation. He naturally enjoyed the most lavish guest room. Not only were there starstones piled around randomly for him to spend as he liked, there was even a 100-fold time cultivation chamber. Mo Clan only opened this kind of guest room to the most esteemed of guests like the heir of a celestial king and ascending origin tier elites, and Ling Han could also enjoy this kind of treatment, which was proof of how highly Mo Clan regarded him. And after staying for one night, Mo Shuang suddenly raced over and exclaimed, Brother Ling, Brother Ling! What is it? Ling Han was just sipping tea with the Empress and the others. Life did not just consist of cultivation. When it was time to relax, one should relax. There is a gathering tonight, hosted by Holy Son Liu. How about it? Any interest in going to take a look? Mo Shuang asked with slight excitement. Liu Jia, a holy son of the Universal Cloud sect, the true disciple of Universal Cloud Celestial King. He had long since advanced into the 5th Severance, and he was a man that was destined to become a Celestial King. Though the Universal Cloud sect still had 13 other holy daughters and holy sons, they all paled in color next to Liu Jia's brilliance. No one thought that there was any other holy daughter or holy son that could contest for the future position of sect leader with Liu Jia. Chapter 1939. Brother Ling, what star rank alchemist are you? Ling Han's heart suddenly jolted. The overall level of cultivation of the wide prosperity heaven and calm peace heaven was more or less equal. But in the last 100 million years, an apparent change had occurred in the feng shui of both areas. To be more specific, there was not much change on the side of the calm peace heaven, but the wide prosperity heaven had improved by leaps and bounds. Yan Xianlu was very, very strong, but even he had to admit that he was not a match for the prodigy ranked 9th in the wide prosperity heaven, which made Ling Han very intrigued, and he wanted to find out just exactly what kind of battle prowess these monarch tiers of the wide prosperity heaven possessed. Husband, you go ahead, we'll stay behind, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said. It was not that she disliked these kinds of events, but rather that she knew just how dangerous the Empress, Huanian and Bewitching Maiden Ro were. Thus, if they did go, it would definitely draw animosity to Ling Han, so it would be better for them to stay behind. They had only come to attend Grandmaster Zhu Feng's celebratory feast, and would soon leave. There really was no need to attract unnecessary trouble. The Empress did not say anything. Her only concern was Ling Han, and she had zero interest in everything else. On the other hand, Huanian and Bewitching Maiden Ro wanted to go. One wanted to stay by Ling Han's side, while the other wanted to broaden her horizons. Apologies, sisters-in-law, I can only bring a single companion. Thus, even if you ladies wish to go, there is nothing that can be done, Mo Shuang said, showing a helpless expression. Now that he had said this, there was nothing that Hu Niu and bewitching Maiden Ro could do. Niu wants to go too. Hu Niu fumed, hands on her hips. Mo Shuang pulled Ling Han along with him and ran off. Sisters-in-law, I will definitely keep a watchful eye on Brother Ling, and definitely will not allow him to flirt around with other women, so rest assured. When he said the last words, he and Ling Han had already exited the doors. What are you in such a rush for? Ling Han asked smilingly. Brother Ling, I've got huge news. Mo Shuang whispered by Ling Han's ear. Do you know why Holy Sun Lu is hosting a feast? Hee, that is because Fairy Lu Han is here. N? Ling Han was a little stumped. Who was Lu Han? Ah, no way, Brother Ling. You don't even know about Fairy Lu Han? Mo Shuang was completely astounded. Why is it necessary for me to know? Ling Han asked with a smile. I really can't believe you. Mo Shuang slapped a hand onto his forehead. Fairy Lu Han is Holy Sun Lu's sister, and she is a cultivation prodigy as well. However, she was taken as a disciple by the mysterious Ice sect. Not only is Fairy Lu Han a cultivation prodigy, she is as beautiful as a celestial maiden, and is known as the number 2 beauty in the entire wide prosperity heaven. Number 2? Ling Han asked smilingly. Why were there people who were so senseless, actually ranking beautiful women? The number 1 beauty is the holy daughter of the Black Flames sect, Xu Yaring. Tiske, she really is beautiful. But she is not as beautiful as sister-in-law Hu, probably about the same level as sister-in-law Ro. Mo Shuang gossiped. His eyes filled with yearning. There was no man who would not like this kind of beautiful prodigy. Brother Ling, you are a monarch tier, and also the youngest junior brother of Grandmaster Zhu Feng. You only have to spare a bit of effort, and you will definitely be able to court Fairy Lu Han successfully. Ling Han couldn't help but be rendered speechless. Now, not only were the Empress and Small Tower encouraging him to court women, even his lackey had this kind of habit? Didn't you say that you would keep an eye on me, and ensure that I did not flirt around with women? He shook his head. Spare me. I do not have the good fortune. Just work hard by yourself so you can court her successfully. She would have to be interested in me first. Mo Shuang sighed. Lu Han was also a monarch tier. The perfect husband in her eyes would have to be a powerful prodigy like Ling Han or Lu Jie. As long as you work hard enough, you will be able to grind an iron rod into a needle. Who made it a rule that women would have to marry someone who was stronger than them? Ling Han encouraged him. I'll back you up. If your cultivation level is not enough, we'll focus on alchemy then. Brother Ling, are you going to teach me alchemy? Mo Shuang's eyes shone. This person was the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist, so he had to be a character on the level of a grandmaster alchemist. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, I'm not trying to discourage you, but you are only at the level of a high-grade trainee in alchemy at most. Immediately, Mo Shuang wilted. Ling Han was right. He had spent a considerably large amount of time on alchemy in any case. He would not be able to break through to the dividing soul tier for the time being, so he had focused on alchemy. However, he had not spent much time from low-grade trainee to middle-grade trainee, and from middle-grade trainee to high-grade trainee, he had spent a great amount of effort. And after he had reached high-grade, he could not advance the slightest inch further. However, there is no rule that says a high-grade trainee would not be able to concoct a celestial pill, Ling Han said slowly. Mo Shuang's expression was filled with shock. To concoct a celestial pill, wouldn't one have to be a 1-star alchemist? This was the dividing line between an alchemist and a trainee. What did it mean that a high-grade trainee would not be able to concoct a celestial pill? Wasn't this extremely contradictory? Ling Han smiled slightly and said, I can be your personal alchemist for a few days. A sudden realization dawned on Mo Shuang. It was fine even if he wasn't skilled in alchemy. Wasn't it the same if he had a friend that was? Let's go, let's go. Instantly, he became excited and urged Ling Han to leave. The two of them exited the doors and boarded the transfer formation. In a flash, they appeared in an endlessly far location. This celestial king tier city was too huge. Without using the transfer formation, just traveling would take a few days, or even dozens of days. By then, it would really be too late for anything. Liu Jie's Holy Sun Manor was very grand. It was a glorious and splendid palace, its furnishings incredibly lavish and grand. Furthermore, it exuded a majesty that could not be described. Just merely standing and gazing at it from afar would cause a feeling of reverence to rise up in one's heart. Even a fearless character like Mo Shuang involuntarily lightened his footsteps now that he had come to this kind of austere place, appearing to be very cautious. The people here were all filled with reverence towards Liu Jie, just like how the younger generation of the calm peace heaven admired Yan Xianlu. At this moment, many guests had already gathered here. There were already a considerable number standing outside. Some had come in pairs, some had come in groups of 3 to 5, and they were all discussing something with each other in low voices. Mo 7th. A young man walked quickly towards them. Long time no see. Mo Shuang immediately showed an expression of fury, his fists gripped tightly. Gritting his teeth, he exclaimed, "Yang eldest." This young man was the eldest young master of the Liu Clan, and because he was the oldest of the younger generation, he was known as Yang eldest. His real name was Yang Jia. The Liu Clan had an old-time feud with the Mo clan, and it had thus spread to their younger generation as well, so they were naturally on opposite sides. This was not like the minor rivalry between him and Liu Haoming, but rather an absolute enmity. The older generation opposed each other, and the younger generation were also on opposing sides. These two people, because they were both well-known figures of the younger generation of their respective clans, had competed with each other in various ways since childhood. Whose cultivation rate was faster? Who knew more techniques? When they became older, it would be competing who had the prettier, hotter girl. The reason why Mo Shuang had entered into the field of alchemy and become a mere trainee was because Yang Jia had entered into the field of alchemy first. He wanted to be better than the other, and in the end, both of them were just dabbling, neither better than the other. "Oh right. Let me introduce someone to you," Yang Jia said proudly. "This is a new brother I have befriended. His name is Yan Wei." He pointed at a young man that was walking out from behind. He was extremely young, yet his face was filled with pride, as if everyone owed him millions of star stones. "Even though my brother Yan is young, he is already a 2-star alchemist, and has even reached the 2nd refinement in spirit refinement." Yang Jia continued to introduce, his eyes filled with challenge. "How about it? I have this kind of friend, do you?" How could Mo Shuang be willing to admit defeat? Hurriedly he exclaimed, "This is my brother Ling, also an alchemist." He paused, and then asked Ling Han in a quiet whisper, "Brother Ling, what star rank alchemist are you?" "Pooh!" Yang Jia immediately spluttered out in laughter. "You must be kidding me. You don't even know what star rank alchemist he is, and still dare to show him off. Idiot!" Chapter 1940. Dare to Gamble. Ha ha ha, how laughable. Don't think that you can refer to yourself as an alchemist just because you've touched a pill cauldron before. Yan Wei said to Ling Han with a disdainful expression. "In the future, don't you dare call yourself an alchemist before me." Mo Shuang was enraged upon hearing this. "You're the true joke. Don't you know that Ling Han is already the junior brother of Grandmaster Zhu Feng? Even if Ling Han genuinely doesn't know how to refine pills, just this relationship alone still gives him the right to refer to himself as an alchemist." "You're a fucking joke," Mo Shuang said in retort. Yan Wei erupted in rage upon hearing this. He was a young prodigy, so others only ever praised him and acted obsequiously before him. Since when had he ever been cursed like this? He's not even a 1-star alchemist, yet he dares to refer to himself as an alchemist. Is this not a joke? Yan Wei said with a sneer. Alchemists had special badges, so one could easily determine what rank they were at. Because of his relationship with Grandmaster Zicheng, Ling Han had kept his badge on while inside the Alchemy City. After leaving the Alchemy City, however, he had naturally taken his badge off as well. It was because of this that Peng Huanian had easily recognized that Ling Han was a 2-star alchemist at that time. Now, however, Yan Wei was viewing Ling Han with absolute contempt and disdain. Alchemists were like cultivators in that they both possessed extremely strict level hierarchies. Moreover, because alchemists were few, and because ascending in ranks was difficult, a difference of 1 star would lead to an extremely huge difference in status. Mo Shuang wanted to retort Yan Wei, but he genuinely didn't know what level Ling Han was at. Thus, he didn't know what to say. In the end, he could only say, even if Brother Ling only refines pills with a single hand, he'll still be several hundred times more skilled than you. Mo Shuang, it's pointless to make such claims, Yang Jia interjected. Mo Shuang was clearly bluffing, so he continued, if he's so skilled, why don't we have a competition? Do you think we'll be afraid? Mo Shuang didn't back down, and he said, are we competing in swordsmanship, saber play, archery, the Tao of Tea, or Go? I'll accept any challenge. Haha, always competing in these areas is boring, Yang Jia said with a shake of his head. He paused for a brief moment before continuing. Why don't we compete in alchemy? We can have Brother Yan competing against your Brother Ling. He purposefully emphasized the words Brother Ling, and his voice was filled with evident disdain. Ling Han rubbed his nose. Was he truly that detestable? He had only accompanied someone to this banquet, and he hadn't even said a word. Yet, he had still become someone's target. Perhaps his halo of trouble was infectious. Humph! What's the point of getting someone else to compete? If we want to compete, it should be between the two of us. Mo Shuang said. He didn't have any confidence in Ling Han. Even though Ling Han was the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist, he didn't even have the badge of an alchemist. If Ling Han were a true alchemist, why wasn't he wearing his badge? Wasn't this a symbol of status? Mo Shuang, you're afraid? Yang Jia said in a provocative voice. I've heard that you have a small cup of earth spirit heavenly spring water that you're planning to refine onto a celestial tool. Coincidentally, I also have a piece of 4-star pseudo-divine metal. Why don't we let Brother Yan compete against your Brother Ling? If you win, I'll gift you this piece of 4-star pseudo-divine metal. You can forge a celestial tool with it. If you lose, however, then the earth spirit heavenly spring water is mine. Mo Shuang was infuriated upon hearing this. This was far too underhanded. How could a measly piece of 4-star pseudo-divine metal compare to his earth spirit heavenly spring water? When refined onto a celestial tool, this treasure could elevate the level of the celestial tool by almost half a star. Moreover, its limit was elevating a celestial tool forged from 7-star pseudo-divine metal. Using it on a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool would be far too wasteful. Even if Yang Jia won, there was simply no way that he would use the earth spirit heavenly spring water on that piece of pseudo-divine metal. Instead, he would save it for later. Someone is offering me a present? Ling Han was moved by this, and purposefully put on an expression of delight. Brother Mo, that's 4-star pseudo-divine metal. Judging from his expression, it was as if he weren't talking about 4-star pseudo-divine metal. Instead, it was as if he were talking about genuine divine metal. TSK, TSK, TSK. Is there any need for such excitement? Even though 4-star pseudo-divine metal is extremely valuable, it's not impossible to obtain them in ascending origin tier forces. At the most, they're only slightly more valuable. Is there any need for such fervent excitement? Yang Jia and Yan Wei both wore expressions of disdain. This person was truly an uneducated bumpkin. It was a mystery how he had ended up together with Mo Shuang. However, Mo Shuang came to some sort of realization upon seeing this. He naturally wouldn't suspect that Ling Han was unknowledgeable or lowly. After all, Ling Han was a monarch tier, and he was also the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist. Could he truly be so naive and stupid? Mo Shuang was no fool, so he immediately reached a conclusion. Ling Han was planning to screw Yang Jia and Yan Wei over. He naturally wouldn't oppose this. Instead, he would happily cooperate. He hurriedly said, Brother Ling, 4-star pseudo-divine metal is nowhere near as valuable as earth spirit heavenly spring water. This gamble isn't worth it. Are you questioning my abilities? Ling Han said in anger. He acted as if he had suffered great humiliation. No, Brother Ling, listen to me. Mo Shuang said in a frantic voice. His cooperation was flawless. Yang Jia hurriedly cut him off and said, Brother Mo, your Brother Ling is so confident, so why don't you let him try? Yang Jia, you have the face to say this? Mo Shuang said with a humph. How can measly 4-star pseudo-divine metal compare to earth spirit heavenly spring water? Fine, then I'll add the leaf of a celestial medicine, Yang Jia said with arrogance. Green divine phoenix grass with a medicinal age of 9 billion years. It possesses fragments of the regulations of flames. Mo Shuang was extremely enticed upon hearing this. Regardless of what celestial medicine it was, they were all supreme treasures. Even if he didn't cultivate the same regulations, he could simply use it to exchange for something else. Moreover, it possessed a medicinal age of 9 billion years. This was definitely old enough. Generally speaking, only celestial king tier forces could nurture celestial medicines that were of the 5 elements. Regarding celestial medicines such as the void flower, lightning flower, and so on, they were so difficult to nurture that even celestial kings would have trouble raising them. Thus, they could only rely on nature to birth such celestial medicines. As such, they would naturally be more valuable. We'll accept this challenge, Ling Han said. Very well. Yang Jia immediately answered. He was afraid that Mo Shuang might back out. An anxious expression involuntarily spread across Mo Shuang's face. Yang Jia and Yan Wei had indeed taken the bait. However, the problem was that he had absolutely no idea about Ling Han's alchemy skills. What if he were the one being screwed over? However, since Ling Han had already agreed to the challenge, how could he back out now? He had no option but to accept this challenge. At the most, he would sacrifice some earth spirit heavenly spring water to strengthen his relationship with Ling Han. Hold up! Yan Wei suddenly shouted. Ling Han couldn't help but glance over. Perhaps Yan Wei had suddenly developed some intelligence, and seen through his ploy. Add another vial of soul-strengthening pill, Yan Wei said. He retrieved a vial of pills and placed it on a stone table. Do you dare? So he was increasing the stakes. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief in his mind. Soul-strengthening pills were for cultivators at the dividing soul tier. During this cultivation level, one needed to cultivate the souls that they had separated out, and soul-strengthening pills could aid in this process. In other words, these were alchemical pills commonly used among those at the dividing soul tier. However, they were indeed very valuable. In any case, there were no cheap celestial pills. After all, they all required a small portion of celestial medicines. Do you think I'll be afraid? Ling Han asked. He pretended to be a rash youth. Meanwhile, Mo Shuang pretended to persuade him, yet he naturally couldn't convince Ling Han to back down. In the end, he could only increase his own stakes as well. He added 10 vials of Azure Dew pills. These were for cultivators at the severing mundane tier, so they were naturally less valuable. As a result, he had to offer 10 times the amount. Then let's begin, Yan Wei said with a haughty expression. In his eyes, Ling Han would back down in defeat once he revealed his skills. Come on, let's go to the time cultivation chamber. The 4 of them set off together. Moreover, they were naturally followed by a large crowd of onlookers. There was a show to be seen. Chapter 1941. He's Peng Huanian's senior uncle. The residents of the Holy Sun naturally possessed time cultivation chambers. Moreover, there were 3 types in total. The first type could accelerate time by 50-fold, and was used for cultivation by the servants in the residence. Even though its effects were the weakest, this was still a relatively attractive benefit. After all, it was free of charge. If this were outside, using such a time cultivation chamber for a day would cost an exorbitant amount of money. The second type could accelerate time by 100-fold, and was offered to the guests of the residence. It was naturally free of charge as well. The third and final type could accelerate time by 200-fold, and was dedicated to the Holy Sun. There was only 1 room in total. Apart from Liu Jia, only those who received special permission could use this time cultivation chamber. Thus, Ling Han and the others naturally couldn't use this third type of cultivation chamber. Instead, they chose a cultivation chamber that could accelerate time by 100-fold. As long as one entered the residence of the Holy Sun, this type of cultivation chamber was free to use. Moreover, there was a great number of these cultivation chambers, so there was no need for them to both cram into one room. Ling Han and Yan Wei entered the cultivation chambers, and they each retrieved a pill cauldron to begin their preparations. At the same time, they also deactivated the concealment barriers of the cultivation chambers. This would allow the onlookers to clearly see the situation inside. However, this was limited to sight and sound. Odors couldn't travel out from the cultivation chambers. Since this was a competition, they naturally had to ensure fairness. Otherwise, what if one of them simply retrieved a high-level celestial pill from their spatial god tool? What would happen then? Upon learning of this alchemy battle, more and more people headed over to spectate. I'm going to accept wagers, Mo Shuang suddenly shouted. No matter whom you place your bet on, the payout will be 2 times your wager. Ling Han had told him to do this before entering the cultivation chamber. Since he had decided to make some money, he would go all out. Meanwhile, many people were still unsure about the current situation. However, after asking around, they all placed their bets on Yan Wei. This was a certain victory. Mo Shuang's head had definitely been kicked by a donkey. He was actually convinced that Ling Han would win. Such an outcome was simply impossible. However, Yang Jia's heart jolted when he saw this. In the beginning, Mo Shuang had been strongly against this challenge. Now, however, he was actually accepting wagers. Was this because he had gained confidence? However, judging from the payouts, he didn't seem to be leaning toward anyone. This left him feeling slightly confused. In any case, Yang Jia was already confident of his victory. On some stone table, there was a pile of spatial god tools. Most of them were filled with star stones. There were also a few people who wagered valuable pseudo-divine metal. They were clearly looking to make a huge earning. As he looked at the increasing wagers on the stone table, Mo Shuang couldn't help but shed cold sweat. This was because most people were wagering on Ling Han's loss. Thus, if Ling Han truly lost, he would also become a big loser. If Ling Han won, however, his earnings would be absolutely astonishing. Why is it so boisterous here? Han Tao asked as he strode over. After listening to someone's explanation, his expression involuntarily became strange. He was well aware of Ling Han's background. At the very least, he knew some things. As the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist, was Ling Han not freakish enough? This Yan Wei truly possessed outstanding courage. He actually dared to challenge Ling Han in alchemy. Was he not seeking a pummeling? Haha, I'll also place a bet then, he said with a hearty laugh. How could he miss this opportunity to make a quick buck? Betting has stopped. Betting has stopped. Mo Shuang hurriedly exclaimed. He didn't allow Han Tao to continue with his wager. Brother Mo, that's very unkind of you, Han Tao said with a chuckle. Since you're making a killing, you should also give me some small benefits, no? The surrounding onlookers were all puzzled upon hearing this. Judging from Han Tao's words, it was as if he were confident of Ling Han's victory. Where was his confidence coming from? Brother Han, what do you mean? Someone asked. Han Tao chuckled. Nothing, I just think that Brother Ling will definitely win, he said in a perfunctory manner. However, who would believe him? Everyone shook their heads upon hearing this. Some hot-headed people even asked, Brother Han, perhaps this Ling Han is a 3-star alchemist? I'm not sure, Han Tao replied with a shake of his head. I genuinely don't know what rank Brother Ling is at. In fact, I don't even know whether he's a true alchemist or not. Then where has your confidence come from? A mysterious smile spread across Han Tao's face. Upon seeing everyone's gazes gathering upon him, he finally said, however, I do know a tiny bit of information that I can share with everyone. Everyone is familiar with Peng Huanian, alchemist Peng, right? Everyone was naturally familiar with him. After all, Peng Huanian was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's most impressive disciple. In the future, he might even become a 4-star alchemist. However, why was Han Tao suddenly mentioning Peng Huanian? Gasp! Perhaps Ling Han is Peng Huanian's disciple? Someone exclaimed in astonishment. The likes of Mo Shuang, Yang Jia, and even Han Tao were all the disciples of some alchemist. They were all students of alchemy. Moreover, they all belonged to the branch of Grandmaster Zhu Feng. However, they were there to play around more than anything else. Thus, Peng Huanian naturally couldn't take them as disciples. Instead, he simply sent some 1-star alchemists over to teach them. There was no strict master-disciple relationship between them, so no one would view them as immoral even if they got into an argument and became enemies in the future. Of course, even though there was no strict rule, it was still best to maintain a good relationship. After all, this could affect their reputation. Thus, if Peng Huanian personally took Ling Han as a disciple, things would be completely different. That would be proof of Ling Han's alchemy talent. That's impossible. If he's Peng Huanian's disciple, why have I never heard of him before? Someone asked in a doubtful voice. Peng Huanian had been practicing alchemy with Grandmaster Zhu Feng in Guanhua City this entire time. Thus, even if he did take a disciple, that would definitely be a matter in Guanhua City. Moreover, even though Guanhua City was huge, Peng Huanian could still be considered as an impressive figure. As such, who wouldn't know about his disciples? Perhaps he's a talent that alchemist Peng discovered while traveling and training outside. Someone speculated. This made some sense. Brother Han, why don't you continue? Some impatient people said. They couldn't be bothered speculating, and they wanted the answer right away. Han Tao smiled before glancing at Mo Shuang, and saying, why don't we let Brother Mo reveal the answer? It was clear that he would reveal the answer even if Mo Shuang didn't. Thus, Mo Shuang could only say, Peng Huanian is Brother Han's apprentice nephew. Pooh! Almost half of the onlookers choked and spluttered upon hearing this. The remaining half of them were also wide-eyed with shock. Everyone's first reaction was utter astonishment. This was far too astounding. Then, their second reaction was that Mo Shuang was lying. Has his head been kicked in by a donkey? Why didn't he say that Ling Han was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's apprentice uncle? Wouldn't that be even more impressive? This was absolute bullshit. Ha ha ha. Yang Jia was the first to burst into laughter. Brother Mo, you almost tricked me there. Your imagination is so rich. I'm truly impressed. Although he said that he was impressed, his face was filled with a strong sense of disdain. It was clear that being impressed could refer to either a positive manner or a negative manner. However, Mo Shuang wasn't enraged upon hearing this. If he hadn't seen and heard with his own eyes and ears, he wouldn't have believed this, either. Ling Han was indeed a freak. Young Master Mo, I urge you to retract your words and sincerely apologize to my master. A young man said in fury. It was as if flames of anger were about to burst forth from his eyes. He was called Gue Deshui, and he was one of Peng Huanian's disciples. Thus, he was naturally infuriated upon hearing Mo Shuang blatantly smearing his esteemed master. In terms of background, he was completely no match for Mo Shuang. Thus, even though Mo Shuang technically had to refer to him as apprentice uncle, he didn't dare to act like one at all. After all, he was only a measly one-star alchemist. Chapter 1942. No such person. Why should I apologize? Mo Shuang asked in a calm voice. To say nothing of the fact that he was telling the truth, even if he were truly lying, he wasn't someone who could be scolded by a measly one-star alchemist. He was an emperor tier. You're smearing my master, Gue Deshui shouted. It was clear that he was beside himself with fury. The smile vanished from Mo Shuang's face, and he asked with an intense expression, how have I smeared him? Right now, he was extremely ticked off at Peng Huanian. What kind of senior master was he? He had actually been pushing him toward a fire pit. What an immoral master. In any case, Mo Shuang only treated alchemy as a hobby and something to play around with. Now that he was extremely dissatisfied with Peng Huanian, he naturally lost all interest in alchemy as well. Gue Deshui was red-faced with anger, and his chest continued to rise and fall. How was this not smearing his master? Mo Shuang had already called his master the nephew of some foolish weakling. Could he smear him any more than this? You're not only smearing my master, but you're even smearing Grandmaster Zhu Feng, he shouted. Flames burst from his eyes. Alchemists naturally cultivated the regulations of flames, so they were all masters of manipulating fire. Everyone nodded in agreement upon hearing this. If this accusation stuck, Mo Shuang would definitely suffer severe punishment. Was this not the case? If Ling Han were Peng Huanian's apprentice uncle, wouldn't that make him Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother? This was a preposterous joke. How could such a young person be Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother? Even if he wanted to boast, he should have come up with a more believable lie. Piss off to the side. I don't have time to speak nonsense with a measly person like you. Mo Shuang said in a cold voice. As a mighty emperor tier, it was naturally beneath him to pick on such a weakling. Pummeling an alchemist would be lowering his own status. Almost no one would group alchemists and cultivators together. So-called alchemists had some cultivation, yet their battle prowess was absolutely dismal. You. Gue de Xue's finger trembled as he pointed at Mo Shuang. After a while, he turned around and marched off in fury. He definitely couldn't defeat Mo Shuang. However, Peng Huanian had no shortage of disciples who were 2-star alchemists or dividing soul-tier elites. Thus, he could seek the help of these people. At the very least, he wouldn't be suppressed by Mo Shuang anymore. However, Mo Shuang was filled with confidence. So what if Gue de Xue obtained help from Peng Huanian's disciples? Even if Peng Huanian personally came, he would still have to obediently refer to Ling Han as senior uncle. Brother Mo, you've gotten yourself into a serious situation now, Yang Jia said with a chuckle. He didn't feel any sympathy for Mo Shuang at all. Instead, he was eager to see him getting screwed over. Heh, it's hard to say who's going to get screwed over, Mo Shuang said in a calm voice. He was definitely going to win this gamble. Meanwhile, if Peng Huanian truly did show himself, he would definitely beat him up. That old geezer actually dared to screw him over. Fuck his mom. Hurry, look over there. They've already begun refining their pills. Someone suddenly exclaimed. This quickly captured everyone's attention, and they all looked toward the 2 cultivation chambers. However, those who didn't understand alchemy could only watch on in confusion. They felt like Ling Han and Yan Wei's movements were extremely quick and dazzling. However, they were absolutely clueless about who had the advantage. Perhaps they were good at fighting. However, alchemy was an entirely different domain. Ha! Zhu Zijuan has come. Someone suddenly exclaimed. He then shouted, Young Master Zhu, come over for a moment. Before long, a tall youth was already walking over. He wore a faint smile, and he appeared as confident as could be. Zhu Zijuan was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson, and he possessed astonishing talent in alchemy. Moreover, he practiced both cultivation and martial arts, so he was extremely renowned in Guanhua City even though he was still young. Young Master Zhu. Everyone started to greet him. What's wrong? Zhu Zijuan asked. He felt slightly puzzled. Why had they suddenly called him over? Those 2 people are competing in alchemy, so why doesn't young Master Zhu critique their skills? Someone said. Zhu Zijuan frowned upon hearing this. He was an alchemy prodigy, and even though he was only a 2-star alchemist at the moment, he had already reached the 3rd spirit refinement. At the same age, even Grandmaster Zhu Feng had been no more skillful than him. Yet, they actually wanted him to critique this competition. Who was worthy? However, there were many king tiers here, and there were even some emperor tiers. He didn't want to offend them, so he could only say, both of them are refining 2-star alchemical pills. They're about to finish their refinement. Refining alchemical pills generally took 1 month. If one were refining a celestial pill, however, it was rumored that it would take anywhere from several thousand years to a whopping several hundreds of thousands of years. Anyhow, with time accelerated by 100-fold, 1 month would only be 7 or so hours. Right now, 4 hours had already passed, so they had naturally passed the halfway mark of their refinement. 2-star alchemical pills. Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. It was no surprise that Yan Wei could refine 2-star alchemical pills. After all, he was already a 2-star alchemist. Thus, it would be strange if he couldn't refine a 2-star alchemical pill. Their astonishment was derived from the fact that Ling Han could also refine a 2-star alchemical pill. This person. Not only was he a genuine alchemist, but he was more so a 2-star alchemist. Gasp. Upon seeing everyone's astonishment, a look of disdain spread across Zhu Zijuan's face. These people knew absolutely nothing about alchemy. He continued, there's nothing impressive about 2-star alchemists. In fact, it's spirit refinement that determines an alchemist's ultimate potential. Upon becoming an alchemist, spirit refinement is of utmost importance. Everyone nodded in understanding. In terms of alchemy, they indeed didn't have any knowledge. Zhu Zijuan was the expert. Oh, that's right. Young Master Zhu. Dare I ask if Grandmaster Zhu has a junior brother? Someone asked. The surrounding onlookers instantly perked their ears up. They were all extremely curious about this. Just what was Ling Han's background? If he were truly Peng Huanian's senior uncle, that would be fairly frightening. Zhu Zijuan frowned again. Were these people retarded? According to my knowledge, no, he said with a shake of his head. Sure enough, Grandmaster Zhu Feng didn't have a junior brother. Everyone nodded upon hearing this. Indeed, this aligned with their understanding of the current situation. After all, how could Grandmaster Zhu Feng have such a young junior brother? Mo Shuang would definitely suffer a miserable fate now. Yang Jia was more so instilled with confidence. After learning that Ling Han was a 2-star alchemist, he had truly been worried for a moment. Now, however, Meanwhile, Mo Shuang and Han Tao were both slightly dumbfounded. What in the world was going on? Peng Huanian had personally admitted that Ling Han was his senior uncle. In other words, Ling Han was naturally Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother. Would a mighty 3-star alchemist make such a joke? Impossible. Then why had Zhu Zijuan denied this relationship? They racked their brains, yet they couldn't think of any logical reason. Was there some kind of misunderstanding or complication? In any case, they would sit back and observe the situation. Inside the time cultivation chambers, both Ling Han and Yen Wei had finished refining their alchemical pills. Right now, they were preparing to perform spirit refinement. At this moment, commotion suddenly traveled over from the back of the crowd. Everyone glanced back, only to see that Gui Deshui had already returned. Next to him were 2 middle-aged men, both wearing dignified expressions. It was clear that they had enjoyed a lofty status for a very long time. Who is it? Who dares to pretend to be my master's senior uncle? One of the middle-aged men asked in a stern voice. His eyebrows were furrowed, and his fury was evident. He was called Ran Fei, and he was Peng Huanian's second disciple. The other middle-aged man was called Shi Yong, and he was Peng Huanian's third disciple. Even though they were only 2-star alchemists, they had both reached the second spirit refinement already. This was very impressive. Young Master Zhu. Ran Fei and Shi Yong both faltered upon seeing Zhu Zijuan. They then walked over to greet him. They were of the same status, and they were more so his senior brothers. However, Zhu Zijuan was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson, so they naturally couldn't compare to him. Chapter 1943. Confrontation. A reserved smile appeared on Zhu Zijuan's face, and he said with a nod, "Senior brother Ran, senior brother Shi." Although he was haughty, he didn't need to exhibit this by acting arrogant. "Young Master Zhu, someone is actually daring to pretend to be your grandfather's junior brother," Shi Yong shouted. His gaze was vicious as he swept it across the surroundings, and it was as if he were trying to look for the person who had created this rumor. Zhu Zijuan faltered upon hearing this. He then flared up in rage. No wonder someone had asked him if Zhu Feng had a junior brother just then. As it turned out, it was because of this. How truly audacious. This person even dared to claim to be Zhu Feng's junior brother. What else wouldn't they dare to do? Perhaps they should impostor as a celestial king's junior brother. Who? Zhu Zijuan asked with a baleful expression. He stared at the crowd, and it was clear that he was incandescent with rage. Swoosh. Everyone turned their gaze toward Mo Shuang. "Brother Mo, I need an explanation," Zhu Zijuan said in a calm voice. Even though his voice wasn't loud, everyone could hear the anger boiling underneath it. This anger was already on the verge of erupting. Mo Shuang was under immense pressure. Moreover, he was also extremely confused at this moment. How the fuck should I know what's going on? Peng Huanian clearly referred to Ling Han as his senior uncle, yet not a single one of you knows about this? Then where in the world did the senior uncle, Ling Han, leap out from? A crack in the rock. How can there be such strange things in this world? At this moment, Mo Shuang could only remain silent. What else could he say? In any case, it was the others who hadn't made heads or tails of the situation, so what did this have to do with him? That's right, we need an explanation. Shi Yong and Ran Fei also roared in rage. This relationship was directly related to them. If they silently accepted this relationship, wouldn't they have to refer to Ling Han as senior uncle? Is it that person? Zhu Zijuan asked. He finally came to his senses, and he locked his ice-cold gaze onto the cultivation chamber that Ling Han was in. Regardless of how enraged he was, there was nothing he could do about Mo Shuang. After all, the latter was an important member of an ascending origin tier force. However, Ling Han was different. This brat actually dared to pretend to be his grandfather's junior brother. Why the fuck didn't he ascend the heavens? He would wait. He would wait until this person left the cultivation chamber. At that time, he would give him a vicious slap across the face. He wore a dark expression as he stood there, and everyone could tell that there was a ball of explosive anger sitting in his chest. The onlookers all clicked their tongues in wonder. This was truly very interesting. Someone actually dared to claim to be Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother. Just how retarded would one need to be to do such a preposterous thing? There was a good show to be seen. Meanwhile, Yang Jia was filled with a feeling of triumphance. Right now, he was already itching to collect his winnings from this gamble. He would then scold Mo Shuang until he couldn't raise his head ever again. What an absolute retard. Several more hours passed, and Yan Wei was the first to leave his cultivation chamber. There was a haughty expression on his face. He had refined a 2-star alchemical pill, and he had then performed 1 spirit refinement on it. By doing so, he had elevated the alchemical pill from the medium grade to the high grade. In terms of refining alchemical pills, he was confident of his success rate. In terms of second refinement, however, he was somewhat lacking in confidence. There was a large chance that he might fail. However, he had succeeded in 1 try this time, so he was naturally beside himself with joy and satisfaction. What about Ling Han? He looked toward the other cultivation chamber, only to see that Ling Han was still refining his alchemical pill. An expression of disdain involuntarily spread across his face. How slow! When it came to alchemy, being slow and steady wouldn't necessarily lead to a better result. In fact, when refining alchemical pills, one needed to complete the refinement in a set amount of this. Otherwise, the only possibility was blowing up their cauldron. He's finished refining, but he's still performing spirit refinement. Hang on. This brat can actually perform spirit refinement? One had to realize that at least 70% of 1-star alchemists didn't know how to perform spirit refinement. Only a small number of prodigies possessed the skill to perform spirit refinement. As for the others, they could only master spirit refinement after becoming a 2-star alchemist. Thus, it was spirit refinement that reflected an alchemist's skill. After a while, Ling Han finally opened the door of his cultivation chamber. Although the order in which they finished refining wasn't an absolute indication of their skill, the onlookers were already accustomed to thinking about problems from the perspective of cultivators. Thus, they instantly felt like Ling Han's skill was inferior to Yan Wei's. Yan Wei humphed coldly before saying, "Admit defeat. That way, you can at least lose with some dignity." "I don't have such a habit," Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Regardless of whether it was cultivation or alchemy, he didn't have a habit of admitting defeat before even trying. "You won't feel regret until you see your own grave. Then I'll defeat you in the most comprehensive manner," Yan Wei said with a haughty expression. He raised his right hand and said, "I've refined an Azure Origin pill, a 2-star alchemical pill. I've also completed 1 spirit refinement." Spirit refinement. Even though there were few alchemists among the onlookers, everyone shuddered upon hearing this phrase. Being able to perform spirit refinement indicated that this person truly possessed talent in the domain of alchemy. Their future was bright and full of potential. Yan Wei was extremely young, so being able to perform spirit refinement at such an age indicated that he was a true prodigy. Even Zhu Zijuan nodded upon seeing this. This person is indeed impressive. I wonder which master has raised such a young prodigy. Are there any 2-star alchemists present? Yan Wei asked in a loud voice. "I am," Ran Fei replied. "Can you please appraise this Azure Origin pill for me?" Yan Wei asked. "No problem." Ran Fei approached the celestial pill and carefully examined it for a moment. He then said, "This alchemical pill is of the medium grade, and after 1 spirit refinement, it has now reached the high grade." Everyone nodded upon hearing this. They didn't know how to refine alchemical pills, but they had all eaten many celestial pills before. High-grade 2-star alchemical pills were already very decent, and they were at least 3 times more expensive than medium-grade 2-star alchemical pills. This was the value of spirit refinement. What else do you have to say now? Yan Wei asked as he looked at Ling Han. His face was filled with haughtiness and pride. He was the disciple of a 3-star alchemist, and he had come here representing his master to give well wishes to Grandmaster Zhu Feng. He was a haughty person, and he believed that it was because of his bad luck that he hadn't been able to find a 4-star alchemist as his master. Otherwise, he was sure that his accomplishment would be even greater. This belief caused him to develop a twisted sense of dignity. Regardless of what it was, he was always hell-bent on gaining an advantage over others. A faint smile spread across Ling Han's face, and he also tossed his alchemical pill to Ran Fei, saying, "Help me appraise it." "Oh, you're fairly confident, huh?" Ran Fei accepted the pill and glanced at Ling Han, saying, "You're the person who's impersonating the senior uncle of my master?" Ling Han chuckled and replied, "I'm not so desperate and lowly that I need to impersonate the senior uncle of your master yet. In fact, if it weren't for my relationship with my 3rd senior brother, I truly wouldn't want a junior nephew such as your master." "How audacious!" Zhu Zijuan, Ran Fei, and Shi Yong roared in unison. Their faces were filled with rage. This person had truly become addicted to impersonating others. Before the 3 of them, he still dared to utter such preposterous bullshit. Just who did he think he was? Ling Han waved his hand and said, "We can talk about whether I'm an imposter or not later. Hurry up and appraise my alchemical pill first." There was still a large pile of wagers awaiting his collection. Zhu Zijuan and the others were naturally enraged upon hearing this. Ling Han dared to claim to be the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist, and this was already a severe crime. Now, however, he was acting as if it weren't a matter of concern at all. "Fine, appraise it first," Zhu Zijuan said in a solemn voice. Ran Fei nodded in understanding before beginning to appraise the alchemical pill. He opened this pill vial, and after taking a single sniff, his expression instantly changed. Even the trashiest of alchemists could act as an appraiser for alchemical pills. After all, this was the most fundamental skill. If they couldn't even appraise alchemical pills, they would have absolutely no hope of becoming an alchemist. This alchemical pill was extraordinary. Ran Fei poured the alchemical pill out, and his eyes almost popped out from their sockets. 3 golden lines. 3rd refinement. Impossible. He looked up, and this caused both Shi Yong and Zhu Zijuan to glance over. Their expressions also changed. 3rd refinement. Even if Ling Han had only refined a 1-star alchemical pill, just this alone was already enough to hand him victory. No, they definitely couldn't allow Ling Han to win. Zhu Zijuan immediately shook his head at Ran Fei. Chapter 1944. Cheating. Ran Fei instantly understood Zhu Zijuan's intentions. He purposefully coughed, and he placed the alchemical pill back into the pill vial as he did so. During this process, however, he had already swapped the alchemical pill out for an ordinary celestial pill. Meanwhile, he placed Ling Han's alchemical pill into his own spatial god tool. Humph, this is nothing but a mere 1-star alchemical pill. Moreover, it hasn't even undergone spirit refinement. What a ridiculous joke, he said in disdain. He waved his hand and tossed the pill vial back to Ling Han. Ling Han caught the pill vial, and a cold smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Did they think he was blind? They wanted to cheat him. He pointed at Ran Fei and said, "Don't try such cheap tricks on me. Return my alchemical pill to me." Ran Fei glared at Ling Han and asked, "What alchemical pill?" His brows furrowed and he said, "Not only are you daring to impersonate a senior, but you're even trying to smear my reputation. I'm a 2-star alchemist. Before me, you're nothing but trash." Everyone was baffled upon hearing this exchange. Ling Han was accusing Ran Fei of swapping his alchemical pill out, while Ran Fei was denying this, and accusing Ling Han of defaming him. Which of them was lying? Humph, you actually dare to impersonate my grandfather's junior brother. Just how audacious are you? Zhu Zijuan said as he strode toward Ling Han. His eyes were blazing with fury. Zhu Feng was the pride of the Liu Clan, and he was also the pillar of the Liu Clan. He definitely couldn't be slandered by others. Ling Han smiled and said, "Obediently return my alchemical pill, and we can sort through these problems one by one. We'll deal with the gamble first, and we'll deal with my identity later." Such wanton audaciousness. "You're trying to change the topic to buy time?" Zhu Zijuan said in an ice-cold voice. "Kneel and apologize." On one side was a stranger with no background. On the other side was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson. Whom would everyone believe? They naturally believed Zhu Zijuan. Thus, everyone shook their head in disappointment. They couldn't help but think that Ling Han was extremely foolish. So be it if he impersonated Grandmaster Zhu Fan's junior brother somewhere else. However, he had chosen to do so here. Moreover, he had been caught by Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson and later generation disciples. Capture him and hand him over to Grandmaster Zhu for punishment. Does such a measly person have the right to see Grandmaster Zhu? Directly punish him with death. In any case, capture him first. Many people started to shout for punishment. These were naturally the people who had wagered that Ling Han would lose. If he were captured and taken away, they would naturally win their wager. Mo Shuang was enraged and he shouted, "Do you people still speak any reason? The competition is about alchemy prowess. What are you people waffling on about? This kind of dishonest person isn't worthy of being called an alchemist," Zhu Zijuan said as he arrived before Ling Han. He then made a pressing motion with his palm. Boom! A boundless aura surged forth, transforming into a symbol of the Great Tao. Zhu Zijuan was a king tier at the peak stage of the fourth severance. Guanhua City was brimming with talents, so Zhu Zijuan couldn't be regarded as a supreme prodigy. However, a king tier at the peak stage of the fourth severance was already no pushover. How strong could a dishonest bumpkin be? Zhu Zijuan could naturally capture him with ease. Anyhow, he seriously wondered whether Mo Shuang's and Han Tao's IQ had been swallowed by a dog. They actually believed that this youth was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother. Ling Han casually reached over with his hand. Pa! Zhu Zijuan's wrist was firmly caught in his hand. What? Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. To casually block a fourth severance king tier strike. This person was definitely an emperor tier. For the sake of third senior brother, I won't lower myself to the same level as you, Ling Han said. He then shook his hand and sent Zhu Zijuan flying back. Zhu Zijuan arched his back and steadied himself. However, his face was filled with shock and disbelief. If Ling Han had wanted to hurt him just then, he could have definitely killed him in a single strike. However, Zhu Zijuan didn't feel a shred of gratitude. Instead, he felt even more humiliated. Did he need to thank Ling Han? He was Grandmaster Zhu Feng's grandson, so who dared to hurt even a single hair of his? Moreover, since Ling Han was an emperor tier, why was he still impersonating Zhu Feng's junior brother? This was far too detestable. Ling Han had purely come here to humiliate others. Who's going to capture this detestable criminal for me? Zhu Zijuan said in a vicious voice. He looked around, only to see expressions of hesitation on everyone's faces. No one responded to his call for help. Those present were all king tiers or emperor tiers, so none of them would casually lower their own status to help him. 1 vial of mundane repairing pills. Zhu Zijuan retrieved a vial of alchemical pills, and said, "I'll gift this vial of mundane repairing pills to whoever captures this detestable criminal for me." Countless people were tempted by this offer. Mundane repairing pills could repair any imperfections that one had during their journey of severing the mundane. Of course, it couldn't allow king tiers to become emperor tiers. However, it could allow low-level king tiers to become high-level king tiers, and it could allow low-level emperor tiers to become high-level emperor tiers. As such, these alchemical pills were extremely rare and valuable. "Young Master Zhu!" Ran Fei and Shi Yong hurriedly exclaimed. Grandmaster Zhu Feng had especially refined these pills for his grandson, and these pills were more so at the 5th refinement. Thus, their value was far above that of ordinary mundane repairing pills. It was no exaggeration to say that they were worth as much as a city. Was there any need to seek help from the onlookers? Both of them were elites at the Yong Soul, so could they not apprehend and capture a measly severing mundane tier cultivator? However, they weren't aware that Zhu Zijuan viewed himself as more of a cultivator. As such, Did the mighty Liu Clan need to dispatch cultivators of a higher tier to suppress a measly brat? That would be far too humiliating. That being the case, Zhu Zijuan was willing to sacrifice a vial of mundane repairing pills to capture Ling Han. In any case, would it be difficult for him to obtain more mundane repairing pills? He could simply ask his grandfather to refine more. An emperor tier stepped forward and said, "I'll capture him." Such a valuable reward was bound to attract a few brave cultivators. Mo Shuang and Han Tao involuntarily shook their heads upon seeing this. Only they knew that Ling Han wasn't simply the junior brother of a 4-star alchemist. In addition to that, he was also a monarch tier in cultivation. In reality, it was the latter identity that was more dazzling and impressive. This was because monarch tiers could definitely become celestial kings. However, 4-star alchemists could only somewhat rival first heaven celestial kings. This gulf in status was quite significant. Against a monarch tier, emperor tiers were generally not even worthy of a single strike. Not to mention, this was a battle between a 5th severance monarch tier and a 4th severance emperor tier. Ling Han possessed the advantage of an entire minor level. Displeasure spread across Ling Han's face, and he said, "You all like to pester me endlessly, am I right? Fine. Then I'll pummel you until you're satisfied." "Before me, Hu Dong, do you have any right to act so audacious?" the emperor tier said with a sneer. He immediately reached over with a hand. Boom! The sky was filled with symbols of the great Tao. He was truly very powerful, and it was evident that he was already a top-notch emperor tier. With a single hand that could blot out heaven and earth, the emperor tier made a grabbing motion at Ling Han. However, Ling Han simply replied with a casual snap of his fingers. Pooh! A burst of vicious sword chi soared into the sky. This was a comprehension that he had extracted from the regulation of slaughter, and fused into his own sword techniques. Its destructive ability was astonishing, and it was powerful enough to slash the heavens and shatter the earth. Pooh! The colossal hand was instantly sliced into two, with a petrifying murderous aura soaring into the sky. Hu Dong's expression changed drastically. Before he could even shout an alarm, he had already been sent flying by Ling Han's strike. A streak of blood spurted into the air. Thud! He then heavily crashed into the ground, sending a plume of dust and smoke into the air. What? Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. A mighty emperor tier had been defeated in a single strike? Just how powerful was this person? Perhaps he was a monarch tier. Impossible. If he were a monarch tier, why did he need to impersonate Grandmaster Zhu Feng's junior brother? Although this title was indeed astonishing, it was no more impressive than the title of monarch tier. Perhaps he wasn't a monarch tier, but just an emperor tier who had ventured even further? Chapter 1945. Siblings from the Liu Clan. However, since Hu Dong had already been defeated, who else dared to challenge Ling Han? Ran Fei stepped forward and said, "Young Master Zhu, let me capture him." It was clear that 4th Severance Emperor tiers could only rival Ling Han, but not suppress him. In the Severing Mundane tier, perhaps only Holy Sun Lu could suppress him. Of course, Celestial Maiden Lu Han could also suppress him. However, could they command these two supreme beings? Zhu Zijuan pondered for a moment before slowly nodding his head. After receiving Zhu Zijuan's agreement, Ran Fei immediately stepped forward. Boom! An aura that was unique to dividing soul tier elites instantly erupted into the surroundings. Even though alchemists were extremely weak against cultivators of the same cultivation, Ran Fei possessed an advantage of one major tier over Ling Han. Thus, in comparison, he was still indescribably powerful. To a 4th Severance cultivator, even if they were an emperor tier, would still be an insurmountable mountain. The king tiers in the surroundings all wore expressions of disdain. This was a gathering of prodigies, yet upon being unable to defeat Ling Han, Zhu Zijuan was actually seeking the help of a senior. They naturally viewed such action with contempt. Strength was king in the cultivation world. This strength not only referred to one's cultivation, but it also referred to their ability to remain invincible against those at the same cultivation. At this moment, Ling Han also lost his patience. His voice was cold as he said, "By the looks of it, I need to discipline you people for 3rd senior brother. You still dare to utter such nonsense. Ran Fei said with a cold chuckle. He immediately charged forward. Even if he were relatively weak, he was still a dividing soul tier elite. Thus, he would possess a crushing advantage over any severing mundane tier emperor tier. Right now, even the king tiers in the surroundings were wearing expressions of unease. Even though they weren't being targeted, the overwhelming power of a dividing soul tier elite still wasn't something that they could withstand. They had no option but to retreat to avoid his aura. Meanwhile, the emperor tiers fared slightly better. However, it wasn't much better. They still had no option but to retreat. There were 5 celestial tiers, and each subsequent one would be an insurmountable mountain. Ling Han was going to suffer a miserable fate. Boom! Ran Fei's hand crashed down. Pa! Ling Han replied with a casual slap. He clearly hadn't unleashed any regulations, and his movements clearly weren't very quick. Everyone could see his movements clearly. However, as if under a trance, Ran Fei dazedly stared at this slap cracking across his face. There was a crisp slapping sound as Ran Fei was sent flying back. However, before he could fly far, Ling Han grabbed his calf and forcefully dragged him back. There are so many things you could have learned, yet you insisted on learning such dirty tricks. How did third senior brother teach you? Pa! Ling Han slapped Ran Fei again before saying, "You need to respect your seniors." Pa! Even if I'm not your senior, as fellow alchemists, should we not aim to help each other? Pa! With no regard for right or wrong, the first thing you did was accuse me of smearing others. Just who do you think you are? Pa! If it weren't for my strength, wouldn't I need to silently swallow this humiliation? With each point that he raised, Ling Han would slap Ran Fei across the face. Each of these slaps was extremely powerful, and it wasn't long before Ran Fei's entire face became swollen. He looked as ugly as a pig. Pa pa pa! The crisp slapping sounds were incessant, and everyone in the surroundings descended into a state of shock and disbelief. A dividing soul tier elite was completely powerless as Ling Han slapped him across the face. Just how great was the gulf between their strength? 5th Severance Monarch tier. At this moment, no one would doubt Ling Han's strength any longer. Only a monarch tier could overcome the gulf of one major tier. Gasp! He was truly a monarch tier. Heh, it seems like everyone's having fun, huh? There was a long laugh, after which a young man strode over. Behind him was a stunningly beautiful woman. The two of them appeared relaxed, yet they were radiating with a domineering aura that forced everyone in the surroundings to retreat. "Holy Sun Lu," many people said in a trembling voice. There were expressions of absolute respect and reverence on their faces. This was a supreme prodigy whom they could only gaze up at. The words 5th Severance Monarch tier were more than enough to describe his overwhelming strength. Meanwhile, the person beside him was Lu Han, his younger sister. These two siblings were both cultivation prodigies, and they had both become powerful monarch tiers. This was a rare feat, even in the history of the celestial realm. Just how much did the heavens adore them to allow both of them to become so extraordinarily outstanding? "Friend, can you stop for a moment?" Lu Jie said to Ling Han. Even though this was a question, his tone was that of a command. This was only natural. After all, he was a monarch tier, so everyone had to obey his words. Who dared to question him? Ling Han glanced at Lu Jie, and an expression of displeasure spread across his face. If Lu Jie had asked in a friendly manner, he wouldn't have insisted on being unreasonable. However, upon arriving, Lu Jie had directly issued a command at him. This instantly caused Ling Han to feel ticked off. He slapped Ran Fei once more before turning around and saying, "I'm disciplining my junior, so do I need you to stick your nose in?" Fuck! This person is so audacious. Everyone was stunned upon seeing Ling Han retort Lu Jie. Even though Ling Han had already proven his strength as a monarch tier, no one believed that he stood a chance against Lu Jie. This was because there was also a concept of strong and weak among monarch tiers. Among the monarch tiers from the wide prosperity heaven, Lu Jie was ranked around 20th. Although this was near the bottom, was this not stronger than Ling Han? After all, if Ling Han were more powerful, would he not have become famous already? Ling Han? Lu Jie mused. He wasn't angered. Even in the wide prosperity heaven, there were only around 20 monarch tiers in total. Each of them could become a celestial king in the future, and they were the pillars of the wide prosperity heaven. He had learned Ling Han's name by listening to the conversations in the surroundings, and he quietly murmured it to himself. He was certain that he had never heard this name before. I never knew that such a person existed under the branch of Grandmaster Zhu Feng, he said. This was incredible. An alchemist had actually raised a monarch tier? Who would believe this? Release him first, Liu Han commanded. There was strong displeasure in her voice. Liu Jie had already commanded him to stop, yet Ling Han was still acting as he pleased. He was far too arrogant. No matter what, this was still the residence of Liu Jie. Thus by fighting here, just how much did he disrespect Liu Jie? I'm merely disciplining my junior. There's no need for you to worry, Ling Han said. After asking someone, Liu Jie immediately learned of the current situation. He was astonished by what he heard. A monarch tier was actually impersonating an alchemist? He couldn't wrap his head around this. However, if one were to say that Zhu Zijuan and the others were lying, that would be far too preposterous. Did they dare to refute such an important relationship in public? Wouldn't Zhu Zijuan become an unfilial grandson? He pondered for a moment before saying, we should deal with these matters one by one. Weren't you competing in alchemy? Continue. Once he learned of Ling Han's skill in alchemy, he would be able to largely determine whether he was lying or not. Ling Han smiled and said, now this is the way to resolve problems. Then hurry up and release him. Liu Han chimed. Because first impressions were the strongest, she had a very negative view of Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled and said, my alchemical pill was swapped out by him, so how can we continue if I don't get it back? Absolute nonsense. Ran Fei hurriedly shouted. If he were indicted with this crime in public, he might even be expelled by Zhu Feng. That would be far too cruel. Is it up to you to say whether this is nonsense or not? Ling Han said in a cold voice. He was supremely disappointed in this junior's character. Then is it up to you to say? Liu Han asked in a menacing voice. She had already endured Ling Han's haughty attitude for a very long time. It's up to the truth, Ling Han said. It was also at this moment that he retrieved a spatial god tool from Ran Fei's sleeves. He retrieved an alchemical pill from the spatial god tool, and he could naturally tell whether this was the alchemical pill that he had refined or not. Chapter 1946. Our respects to Senior Uncle. Liu Han was infuriated, and she said, you're retrieving an alchemical pill from him, and you're pretending that you refined it yourself? Stupid girl, Ling Han said in disdain. Liu Han raised her brows and questioned. What did you say? Her fury was extremely evident. You didn't hear? Stupid girl, stupid girl, stupid girl. Ling Han repeated himself 3 times. Liu Han exploded in anger, and she could barely contain herself from lunging over to bite Ling Han. From her childhood until now, since when had anyone ever called her a stupid girl? Not only was she a prodigy in cultivation, but she was also breathtakingly beautiful. In fact, she was regarded as the second most beautiful woman in the wide prosperity heaven. As such, it was natural for men to stare at her in awe when they saw her. You blind fool. That's mine. Mine. Ran Fei hurriedly shouted. If he didn't resist, the truth would quickly be revealed. Yours? Ling Han scoffed. Are you not aware that alchemists have a habit of adding their own symbols into their alchemical pills? He funneled some origin power into the alchemical pill, causing it to light up. One could faintly discern the word Ling on the alchemical pill. Commotion instantly swept through the crowd of onlookers. This was as clear as could be. This alchemical pill definitely belonged to Ling Han. Otherwise, why would Ran Fei engrave the word Ling on an alchemical pill that he had refined? Perhaps he harbored some deep feelings for Ling Han. Ran Fei was instantly rendered speechless, and his face flushed beet red. It was naturally humiliating to be exposed before so many people. Liu Han was also rendered speechless. As it turned out, Ling Han had truly been wronged. Perhaps Brother Ran accidentally put the wrong alchemical pill away, Zhu Zijuan said. He casually cleared Ran Fei of any wrongdoing. However, were the onlookers fools? They were all up in arms upon hearing this. Zhu Zijuan was far too shameless. He had been trying so hard to defame Ling Han just then, yet he was now trying to rid himself of any responsibility. They had never come across such a shameless person before. Ling Han couldn't be bothered dealing with these matters at this moment, so he said, "Who else is an alchemist? Please appraise this alchemical pill for me." "Leave it to me," Liu Jie said with a smile. "Although I'm not an alchemist, I do understand alchemy quite well. At the very least, appraising an alchemical pill won't be an issue." Ling Han glanced at him before nodding and saying, "Then I'll leave it to Brother Liu." He handed the alchemical pill over. Liu Jie held it in his hands and carefully examined it for a moment before saying, "This is a jade cloud pill, and among 2-star alchemical pills, it's one of the most difficult to refine. The refinement of this pill has probably reached a high grade. In terms of spirit refinement, it's reached the 3rd refinement." "What? 3rd refinement?" Everyone gasped upon hearing this. Even if they didn't understand the difficulty of refining the jade cloud pill, they were well aware of what 3 spirit refinements signified. The 4th refinement was the limit of most alchemists, and those who reached the 5th refinement could be referred to as grandmasters. This person was far too freakish. In the realm of cultivation, he had reached the position of monarch tier. Meanwhile, in the realm of alchemy, he had also reached the 3rd refinement. He was already closing in on the title of grandmaster. Most importantly, Ling Han was still far too young. By reaching the 3rd refinement at such a young age, it was not a pipe dream for him to reach the 5th refinement. Yan Wei was stupefied upon hearing this. His opponent had refined a more difficult alchemical pill than him, and he had also done so to a higher grade than him. In addition to this, he had even completed more spirit refinements than him. This was an absolute pummeling. With a sliver of hope, he asked, "Then what about the quality of the spirit refinements?" "All 3 spirit refinements can be regarded as perfect. The 3rd spirit refinement is slightly inferior, though this doesn't affect the overall quality of the alchemical pill," Liu Jie replied. He genuinely wasn't favoring anyone, and he was speaking the absolute truth. Yan Wei was rendered speechless. In fact, even if Ling Han's 3 spirit refinements had only been of ordinary quality, they would have still been superior because of the quantity. This was an absolute advantage. Yan Wei had only been holding on to a sliver of hope, yet this had also been extinguished now. Ling Han snapped his fingers and said, "Mo Shuang, collect the winnings." This was the reason why he had agreed to this competition. Otherwise, there was no way he would have given such a performance before so many people. Mo Shuang started to excitedly collect the winnings. He had truly struck a goldmine this time, even though there were also some fortunate people who had wagered for Ling Han, to whom he had to give a share of the winnings. This caused many people to glare at Ling Han and Mo Shuang in anger. These 2 people had screwed them over very badly. Ling Han was clearly so talented in alchemy, yet he had still pretended to be a noob. He had treated them as sheep for slaughter. However, a loss was a loss, and there was nothing they could say. With their position and status, they certainly couldn't argue about this. "Now, it's time to deal with the next matter," Ling Han said. He looked at Zhu Zijuan and continued, "You people swapped my alchemical pill out. As your senior, it's my responsibility to discipline you. Otherwise, others will think that the Zicheng branch of alchemists has no rules." He wore a baleful expression as he said this. Zicheng. Who was the most renowned alchemist in the Eastern Celestial Realm? It was none other than Grandmaster Zicheng. Perhaps Ling Han was Grandmaster Zicheng's disciple? Hang on, was Grandmaster Zhu Feng also Grandmaster Zicheng's disciple? Because Grandmaster Zhu Feng had been expelled by Grandmaster Zicheng, few people knew about his history. Now that everyone heard Ling Han saying this, they finally discovered the relationship between Grandmaster Zhu Feng and Grandmaster Zicheng. Zhu Zijuan's expression instantly changed. Ran Fei and Shi Yong were of a later generation, so they didn't know about the relationship between Grandmaster Zhu Feng and Grandmaster Zicheng. However, Zhu Zijuan was well aware of this relationship. Now that Ling Han had mentioned Grandmaster Zicheng, it was clear that he also had a deep relationship with him. Absolute nonsense. Ran Fei and Shi Yong chided in unison. Ran Fei was extremely fervent, especially since he had been pummeled and humiliated in public by Ling Han. He detested Ling Han to the core. "Oh really?" Ling Han said calmly. "Then why don't you go and ask Peng Huanian?" I'm curious to see what he'll say. You still want to take advantage of my master? Ran Fei jumped up and said, You fucking. Pa. Before Ran Fei could even finish speaking, he was brutally slapped across the face by Zhu Zijuan. Shut up. Zhu Zijuan chided in anger. Ran Fei had no option but to swallow his words. He couldn't help but look at Zhu Zijuan with an aggrieved expression. Why had he suddenly slapped him? Zhu Zijuan was just about to speak, yet he suddenly sensed a familiar aura. He immediately turned around to glance behind him. Not far away, there were two middle-aged men quickly walking over. One was extremely tall, and one was both short and fat. He looked much like a round ball. Uncle Ma, Uncle Chen, he hurriedly said in greeting after faltering for a brief moment. These two middle-aged men were Ma Yong and Chen Dong. Both of them were disciples of Zhu Feng, and they had more so obtained his true inheritance. However, they were still slightly inferior when compared to Peng Huanian. In any case, they were both 3-star alchemists. Ma Yong and Chen Dong only nodded in acknowledgement before quickly finding Ling Han from among the crowd. They hurriedly stepped forward and bowed in respect, saying, Our respects to fourth uncle. Fourth uncle. Commotion instantly swept through the crowd of onlookers. At this moment, no one would doubt Ling Han anymore. Ling Han was indeed Zhu Feng's junior brother. Otherwise, it was impossible for both Ma Yong and Chen Dong to go stupid at once. A grim expression spread across Zhu Zijuan and the others' faces. This confirmation of Ling Han's identity was not good news for them. It signified that they would be targeted in the future. They were in for a world of hurt. Chapter 1947. Are you going to yield or not? Who would have imagined that Ling Han was actually telling the truth? He was truly the junior brother of Grandmaster Zhu Feng. This was far too astonishing, and his status was far too illustrious. Apart from celestial kings, everyone had to give some face to Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand and said, There's no need. You may rise. Only upon hearing this did Ma Yong and Chen Dong straighten their backs. They wore ice-cold expressions as they glanced at Ran Fei and Shi Yong. Uncle Ma, Uncle Chen, the two of them said in trembling voices. Their legs were shaking uncontrollably. Are you not going to hurry up and piss off? Ma Yong roared in anger. Yes, yes. Ran Fei and Shi Yong said with a hurried nod. However, they felt extremely relieved upon hearing this. Behind closed doors, everything could be resolved peacefully. They could easily transform a large matter into a small matter, and a small matter into no matter at all. Hold up! Ling Han waved his hand and said, I still haven't finished speaking, so why are you in such a hurry to leave? Ma Yong shuffled over and said in a quiet voice, Uncle, there are so many people here, so it's best that we don't wash the dirty linen in public. Ling Han scoffed and said, The three of them secretly tried to swap my alchemical pill out for an inferior pill. They've already stooped so low, so how can they be afraid of being punished in public? Don't take things too far, Zhu Zijuan said in a stern voice. Just then, Ling Han had only been targeting Ran Fei, so he had been able to endure that. After all, Ran Fei wasn't an important person to him. Now, however, Ling Han was directly targeting him. He definitely couldn't endure this. Ling Han immediately lashed out. Pa! This was a solid slap. You've been a young master for too long, so you reckon that you can view everyone as inferior to you? You actually dare to hit me? Zhu Zijuan held his face with his right hand, and there was venom flashing in his eyes. He had been a prodigy from a young age, so he had naturally enjoyed everyone's praise and love. Since when had he ever been slapped before? I can't hit you? Ling Han asked in a calm voice. If you weren't third senior brother's grandson, I would kill you, not simply hit you. Uncle Ma, Uncle Chen, you're just going to stand there and watch this person humiliate me? Zhu Zijuan shouted. There was fury and bitter resentment in his eyes. So what if Ling Han was Zhu Feng's junior brother? He had never heard of him before. Moreover, the person most important to Zhu Feng was his esteemed master, Grandmaster Zi Cheng. Apart from him, it was his two senior brothers. Zhu Zijuan had never heard his grandfather mention this junior brother before. Meanwhile, with Ling Han's young age, it was clear that Grandmaster Zi Cheng had only taken him as a disciple recently. He conceded that Ling Han was indeed a prodigy. However, he was only on the same level as himself. Why did Zhu Zijuan have to adopt a lower status? Why did he have to refer to Ling Han as senior uncle? Why did he have to listen to his reprimands, and even be hit in public by him? Had he done anything wrong? No. He had done everything for the sake of the Liu clan's reputation. Someone had dared to impersonate his grandfather's junior brother, so how could he have endured this? As the saying went, those who were unknowing couldn't be guilty. Why was Ling Han so insistent on punishing him? Conflicted expressions spread across Ma Yong's and Chen Dong's face. They had also only just learned that their master had gained such a young junior brother. It was only during noon today that Peng Huanian had reported the matters pertaining to Ling Han to Zhu Feng. As a result, Zhu Feng sternly scolded Peng Huanian for a long while. He then sent the two of them over to invite Ling Han. However, who knew that they would come across such an awkward situation? In their eyes, this was a private matter for their own branch of alchemists. As such, there was no need to create a huge fuss about it in public. Otherwise, they would only be losing face for themselves. Indeed, they were extremely displeased with Ling Han for causing such a huge commotion out of this. However, what could they do? Ling Han was their senior. Before heading over, Zhu Feng had reminded them several times to show respect to Ling Han. Thus, they had immediately bowed in utmost respect upon seeing Ling Han. Right now, they could only try to persuade him. Fourth uncle, perhaps we should do this somewhere else? Ma Yong suggested. There's no need, Ling Han said in a resolute voice. We can deal with things right here. You're nothing but a stupid brat, so what right do you have to become my senior uncle? Zhu Zijuan said. He was going all out. With how much Zhu Feng doted him, he believed that he would only suffer a scolding at most. How could Zhu Feng bear to punish him? Is this for you to question? Ling Han said as he slapped Zhu Zijuan across the face again. I'm intent on punishing you, so are you going to yield or not? Zhu Zijuan straightened his neck and shouted, no. His hair was already disorderly, and his expression of calm had already vanished. He appeared as disheveled as could be. No. Heh. Then I'll beat you until you yield. Ling Han raised his hand and slapped Zhu Zijuan again. Are you going to yield? No. Pa. Are you going to yield? No. After each slap, Ling Han would repeat the same question again. It wasn't long before Zhu Zijuan was slapped silly. Fourth uncle. Fourth uncle. Ma Yong and Chen Dong exclaimed. They were extremely anxious upon seeing this. However, this was a senior disciplining their junior, and this was as natural as could be. Unless they were willing to be expelled, how could they dare to interfere? In any case, even if they interfered, there was no guarantee that they could stop Ling Han. Even though one of them was at the Yang Soul and one of them was at the Yin Soul, they still might not be able to defeat Ling Han even if they teamed up. Thus, they could only try to persuade him. However, Ling Han's mind was set, and he refused to believe that he couldn't beat this junior into submission. If he didn't discipline Zhu Zijuan properly today, Zhu Zijuan would only stray further and further on this incorrect path. He needed to take responsibility for his third senior brother's grandson, so he naturally wouldn't back down. Of course, this was partly because he was pissed off at Zhu Zijuan as well. This person actually dared to cheat him. Did he look like a pushover? Everyone clicked their tongues in wonder upon seeing this. Most people here couldn't compare to Zhu Zijuan's status. However, Zhu Zijuan was now being slapped before them, and Zhu Feng's two disciples could do absolutely nothing about it. They didn't even dare to stop Ling Han. However, thinking about this carefully, they realized that anyone would be pissed off if their alchemical pill were swapped out for an inferior one. If Ling Han hadn't noticed their ploy, he might have truly been screwed over. Zhu Zijuan only had himself to blame. Are you going to yield? Ling Han asked again after slapping Zhu Zijuan for heaven knew how many times. He wasn't simply slapping Zhu Zijuan. In fact, he had even fused some regulations of flames into his slaps, causing the pain to be searing and bone-deep. This was a torturous pain. Zhu Zijuan's willpower was fairly strong, yet he was still rendered confused and disoriented after being slapped several hundred times. His willpower started to weaken, and his only thought was to end this pain as soon as possible. I yield, he murmured. His willpower crumbled, and tears shamefully burst from his eyes. Everyone gasped upon seeing this. Who could believe that a mighty king Tyr and a prodigious alchemist had actually been beaten to the point of tears? They definitely couldn't provoke Ling Han. Just then, they had still wanted to visit Mo Shuang and Ling Han after everything concluded so that they could ask for some of their wager back. After witnessing this, however, they silently rid themselves of this thought. Fuck. They definitely couldn't provoke this person. Otherwise they would be asking to be humiliated. With a flick, Ling Han casually tossed Zhu Zijuan toward Ma Yong. He then glanced at Ran Fei and Shi Yong, and said, regardless of whether it's cultivation or alchemy, the most important thing is one's intentions. If one's intentions are crooked, they'll only end up ruining the reputation of their master. He didn't say that he would expel Ran Fei or Shi Yong. However, who was he? He was Zhu Feng's junior brother, so Zhu Feng would naturally listen to his opinions. Thus, even if Zhu Feng only mentioned this in passing, what would Peng Huanian do? Ran Fei and Shi Yong trembled in fright. They felt extremely aggrieved in their minds. Hadn't they done everything for the sake of Peng Huanian? Why were they going to be expelled for this? No, they had to immediately seek Peng Huanian. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.